Right, I make it 10 o'clock, so I'm going to start this meeting. My name is Councillor Jill Taylor, and I'm Chair of the People and Health Scrutiny Committee. And welcome to this meeting this morning, which looks as if it could be a very busy meeting, and hopefully there'll be a lot of participation, and I hope that a lot of people will get something out of this meeting. Can I first of all do a roll call of the members who are on this committee for the purposes of the public out there? So, as I've said, my name is Councillor Jill Taylor and I'm the chairman. Could I ask, is my vice chairman Molly Rennie, Councillor Rennie there?
I'm here. I'm Molly Rennie, vice chairman of the committee.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Councillor Atkins?
Present, Chair.
Thank you very much, Rod. Councillor Dunseith?
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
Thank you. Good morning. And Councillor Gorringe?
Present, Chair. Good morning.
Good morning, Barry.
Good morning.
Councillor Ireland?
Present, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Nick. And Councillor Legg?
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Robin. And Councillor O'Leary? Are you there, Councillor O'Leary?
Hello.
Hello.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes,
Sorry.
I can. Sorry.
I had to move rooms to get a better connection. Sorry. I'm present, Chair.
Okay. Good morning, Councillor, and welcome to this committee, because this is your first one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Councillor Penfold?
Good morning, everyone. Here, Mary Penfold.
Good morning, Mary. Hoping you're well. And I think, is Councillor Pipe here yet? I know he was going to be a little bit late. So I don't
think he's here yet, Chairman.
Okay, so I'm assuming he's not here, and I'll make a note when he does come in, because we will be aware on the chat bar. If I can just mention on the chat bar, as always with these virtual meetings, could you please restrict anything that you put into the chat bar to purely procedural matters, really, so that I just know when people want to speak. I've got an announcement that I've been asked to make about this meeting because it's a virtual meeting. At the annual meeting of the Council on the 4th of May 2021, it was agreed that all Council meetings that are not executive in nature will continue to be held virtually from the 7th of May 2021 until such time as social distancing requirements are removed. This is currently scheduled for the 21st of June 2021, but I think that is in the balance, and we'll just have to wait and see on the government decision on that. Where a decision is required, committee members will express a minded to decision in respect of recommendations set out in officer reports, with decisions being taken under officer delegated authority in the light of minded to decisions expressed by members in the virtual meeting. The reports on today's agenda are for review by the committee, to ask comments from the committee and support for the direction of future work, and also provide the committee with information to determine if any additional areas should be added to the forward plan for further review. However, item 8, Joint Health Scrutiny Protocol, on this agenda will require a decision to be taken under officer delegation. Steve Reevers, the Corporate Director for Operations Adult Care, will be that officer. Advise members and members of the pub. Oh, sorry, it's just a note to me. Just a note on the running order for this morning. We have an urgent item, which is normally on item 10. I've brought forward the item on the Purbeck ambulance car for a number of reasons, which we'll go into when we come on to that item. But what I'd like to do, because I'm aware there could well be a number of the members of the public out there watching it, waiting for this item, I've decided to move that forward, and it will now be after declarations of interest. So just for clarification, how I'm intending to run that is that I'll be putting the Purbeck ambulance car after declarations of interest, and then I'll be doing public participation, and then I'll be doing members' questions, because all of the public participation and the questions from the members are relating to this item, and then we'll go into the debate. Just for clarification, after that debate, we're going to have a 5-minute comfort break and then go on to the rest of the meeting. In this spot, I'd like to just give members a quick update from the last meeting. As you're aware, we don't have minutes on this meeting because it's not a meeting that I can sign the minutes off at. But I would like to give you an update on the minor injuries unit. We have heard back from the Dorset Healthcare Foundation Trust, and they have advised that the Sherborne, Blandford and Portland minor injuries units are due to reopen again on the 21st of June, all being well, so fingers crossed. There's more information on all of this on the Dorset Healthcare website. I just thought I'd mention that because it's been talked about several times on this Scrutiny Committee, and I think that is a really good update, and I'm really pleased that this is going to happen. The other item that I would just like to mention is there was a request last time for a workshop for members on continuing healthcare and Home First, and this has been arranged for the 1st of July. All members present should have had an invite for that, and I look forward to seeing as many of you as possible there. Right, if we can go on now to item 1, apologies. Fiona, have we got any apologies?
No, no apologies received. Just to let you know that Councillor Pike will be running a little bit late.
Okay, thank you very much, Fiona. Declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest for this part? Okay.
Yeah, Chairman, so I probably should declare I'm a Governor of Dorset Healthcare, Councillor Ireland.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Ireland. I would just mention that if anyone feels they have a declaration that they haven't mentioned as we go through this agenda, please feel free to come in and make a declaration then.
Councillor O'Leary wants to speak, Joe.
Sorry, Chairman, just it may not be relevant, but I'm a school governor for St Andrew's School, whether that comes into it on this one or not, but I thought I'd better just make that declaration.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor O'Leary. Okay, right. So I think we can. Sorry, I do apologise. Turning slightly to the right, but I've got several screens going here at the moment. Right. So if we now go on to the urgent item, which is the paramedic ambulance car, what I'd like to do first of all is just outline what this committee can and what it cannot do with this item and with this subject. I'd like to explain a bit about this item and the role that Dorset Council in responding to consultations and proposals for changes to NHS services in Dorset. How we intend to do things in Dorset Council is a little different from how they worked when the County Council was responsible for the old Dorset Health Scrutiny Committee. Councils do not make decisions about the provision of NHS services, but sometimes we are consulted about proposals for change. If the Council intends to respond to an NHS consultation, then our colleagues in our sister committee, the People and Health Overview Committee, have that role in shaping the Council's consultation response. The committee that I chair, this committee, the People and Health Scrutiny Committee, does not respond when the NHS is still at the stage of consulting about proposals for possible changes to services. Instead, the Scrutiny Committee can become involved later if there is a need to review and look again at significant changes to NHS services. I have received a lot of correspondence about the Purbeck Rapid Response, and indeed this is a matter that was raised on the previous Dorset Health Scrutiny Committee. If I can point out, at that time we did not have a Health Overview Committee. This has prompted me to include an item on our agenda today and to invite NHS colleagues to outline their next steps. At this stage, when NHS colleagues are about to launch a consultation, this committee does not have a role to play in responding to the consultation. It may be that in due course, when the consultation has closed and NHS colleagues have made a decision about the future of the rapid response in Purbeck, that my committee will decide to scrutinise those plans before they take effect. But we're not there yet. We're a long way from that. For the moment, I have taken the pragmatic decision to have this item on the agenda today so that NHS colleagues can provide some early information about their planned engagement and consultation activity. There is no decision to be made by the committee today. I think in addition to this, I would also like to thank everybody who has been writing to us from the public about this issue. I understand and I do appreciate it is a huge issue in the Purbeck area, simply by the amount of the members of the public who are really engaged in this. It is something that I can see that you really value. I know I've got one statement today, and we were quite late putting this on the agenda for a number of reasons. And I've got one statement from a member of the public today. But I am aware I've also had an awful lot into my in tray. And we've also had some really useful information sent to all of the committee from the group that are campaigning to keep this car. And I would just like to take this opportunity to thank you so much for keeping on doing this. We really do appreciate it. So I think what I would like to do with that is to go over to the presentation that we've got on the Purbeck ambulance car. Now, I'm not sure who is doing the presentation. Fiona, could you just clarify that for me, please? Is it
Yes,
Sue?
Chairman, we have Sue Sutton here from CCG.
Okay. Good morning, Sue. I take it you've just put your camera on, and really good to see you and welcome.
Likewise, thank you.
Good morning. Could I hand over to you now for the presentation? What I'll then do is read a statement from Debbie Monkhouse that will be a statement only. And then I'm going to ask the members who have asked to ask questions, and indeed anybody else from any other members outside this committee, if they would like to speak. Thank you. So if I can go to Sue. Thank you very much, Sue.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. Nick Reynolds is here to join me in the presentation, but he is having some technical difficulties. So once we get to his point in the presentation, I'll ask him to join, and if he's not able, then I'll do my best to talk to his slides. So yes, hi everyone, I'm Sue Sutton. I'm the Programme Director for Urgent and Emergency Care at Dorset CCG. And as the Chair has said, the purpose of today is to let the committee know about a planned listening event and to provide some background as well. So we do have a short presentation. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so we absolutely want to listen. I also think it's really important to say up front that the CCG funding is not being removed. And we absolutely understand the importance of this service to the local community, and we want to work with them. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what we just wanted to cover today is how the current service came about. We know you know this, but just worth a reminder. Also the current situation what we're talking about in terms of us saying, what is it we want to listen about. We haven't got lots of time today for discussion as questions as the chair has set out, but we'll do our best at this early stage, given we're not quite at that stage yet. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I know that the committee knows the history, the minor injuries unit moving to daytime, the development of the essentially hybrid model, so that does both the 999 emergency and the community care for the car. So now, 13 years on, we've had national developments, we've had more local investment, and it is the natural time for us to be looking at this service. The money that we spend on the public's behalf, which, as I say, is not reducing, and get the best possible outcomes for patients. So it is the natural time for us to review this service as we do with all services. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I'll just invite Nick to come in if technology will allow. No, I don't think we have Nick. I think he can only hear at the moment, so I'll do my best to do the next few slides on Nick's behalf. So there has been additional investment from the CCG. There's been overall investment across the region, as this is a regional contract, but the Dorset proportion of that was an additional 1.8 million that was made from 2019 into the ambulance service. So for Purbeck specifically, that now means that there are 3 emergency ambulances. So those are double crewed ambulances. We refer to those as DCAs, based in the area instead of 2. I see Nick's on camera. I'm wondering if he's got sound. Nick, are you able to join? It's okay. If not, I'll carry on. Let me know if you want to take the baton. So this is helping patients get to the right response first time without having to wait for additional transport. So for the ambulance service to understand what the patient requires so that they send the right vehicle first time, as opposed to what used to happen sometimes in some cases where 2 ambulances would arrive, obviously taking up 2 resources where one of those could have been used for a patient that was waiting elsewhere. There's also an increase in vehicle and workforce hours in surrounding towns such as Dorchester, Poole and Bournemouth. And more ambulance resources in those areas means there's less ability that there's less chance that the Purbeck resource would get pulled out to other areas in terms of a DCA. Next slide, please. Okay, so what are we talking about here in terms of vehicle responses? There's the double crewed ambulance, as I've referred to, fully equipped and liveried ambulance crewed by ambulance staff trained to deliver clinical care at the scene, and also capable of transporting that patient to hospital or another location. There's the RRV, the rapid response vehicle, which is medically equipped liveried car crewed by a clinically qualified member of staff trained to deliver care at the scene, designed to reach patients as quickly as possible following a 999 call. The RRV is not able to transport patients. That's just the DCA that's able to transport patient. And then we have what we refer to as the Purbeck car, which is essentially a hybrid model. It responds to 999 emergency calls, but it also does community work during daytime hours, working with GP practices in the weekdays, daytime. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a way of us trying to describe pictorially the resources that can arrive. Nick?
Yeah.
Yes,
Hi there,
welcome.
Sue.
Anything you want to add to what I've already said, and I think we're on your last slide.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, thank you. I could hear you throughout, and I do apologise for the technical difficulties. Yeah, just to add into the last slide that The RRV is a resource which is capable of responding but not simultaneously conveying and treating. So we're on to the cartoon slide. This is a slightly simplistic depiction, but all the same illustrates the very real challenge that the ambulance service faces on a daily basis. The two scenarios depict identical circumstances: two patients with a clinical need to be conveyed to hospital, a person on the road and a lady on a bench with chest pain. Both scenarios depict two resources in attendance, an RRV and a DCA, very well explained by Sue. In scenario one, two DCAs, an RRV in scenario one and two DCAs in scenario two. The advantages and disadvantages of both resources are quite well played in these images. The RRV is likely to have been in the local area, and if not responding to another incident, is likely to have responded very quickly. The disadvantage is the uncovered chest pain and the lady who may have had a clinical need for conveyance to an appropriate care setting. Scenario two is the flip side to patient carrying responses, with patients both being conveyed to a place where the needs are met. I'm absolutely sure that we could add many other images to demonstrate differing scenarios, but we must understand the context, which is that some clinical presentations can't be treated on scene. NHS England implemented new ambulance standards across the country, which is the Ambulance Response Programme, or we refer to as ARP, and that was introduced in 2017. This was to ensure that the sickest of our patients get the fastest response, and most importantly, the right response first time. An example of this is strokes and heart attacks, which currently land in our category 2. And these require a DCA to meet the performance standards, as they potentially require treatment in definitive care. So in that very real example, clearing clots out from hearts or scanning of brains is not something that we can do in the ambulance, so we do need these patients in hospital. And that's that slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. If we just go on to the last slide, thank you. Okay, so we have done some initial work on this in line with what is our, what we are here to do. There are no options. Like I say, the money is they're not reducing. We want to work with the community. Today is very much about letting you know that we want to be listening to you moving forward. We will let you know the forward plan, and we will come back to a future committee meeting. And I'll end there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Sue, and to Nick for the presentation. That was really, really useful. If we can move on to the public participation now, because I have a statement from Debbie Monkhouse that I would like to read out. This is a statement, as I said, from Debbie Monkhouse, who is the lead councillor, Emergency Health Services Working Party, Swanage Town Council. Rapid Response Vehicle, Purbeck/Swanage. The Town Council has received a letter from Richard Drax MP stating that he has met the DCCG CEO, and DCCG proposed to withdraw the tethered 24/7 paramedic car from Swanage and replace this with 14 hours to the second Wareham ambulance located 10 miles away and currently funded for 10 hours a day. This proposal would mean a substantial reduction in the availability of an emergency response here. The South West Ambulance Trust response to Langton Herring showed over 13 months that the average time taken from a Swanage Category 1 imminent danger of death call to the ambulance trust to arrival of the patient at Poole Hospital was 1 hour 43 minutes. With the planned loss of A&E, maternity and children's units from Poole, Swanage will be approaching 30 miles, much of it on congested country roads, from emergency hospital care at Dorchester or Bournemouth. The further hospital care is moved away, the greater the need for an available fast life-saving response here in Swanage. Unlike the paramedic car, which is a fast 4x4 that does not routinely take patients to hospital and which supports Purbeck GP home visits, so is tethered to base, ambulances are routinely out of base in use across the county. Even if an ambulance is available at Wareham when there is an emergency in Swanage, it cannot get here within the 8-minute target response time that gives the best chance to save life. Promises have been made by the DCCG regarding the emergency response resources based in Swanage. In 2008, the 24/7 paramedic car was allocated in perpetuity as recompense for the overnight closure of urgent care at Swanage Cottage Hospital. Dorset County Health Scrutiny Minutes of the 17th of October 2018 contain a commitment from the DCCG to Dorset Council that, in the context of the planned loss of A&E, maternity and children's care from Poole, Swanage Ambulance Station and the emergency response vehicles and staff based there will be fully maintained. Brackets, page 5, para 1, brackets. The same minutes suggest that there would also be additional Purbeck-based ambulance cover. Summary tables provided by the Ambulance Trust show 1,875 Purbeck call-outs of a paramedic car over a year, and with more than half of the call-outs being Category 1 to 3 emergencies, the most serious. There is higher overall use, Category 1 use, and Category 1 to 3 use in Swanage than in the rest of Purbeck. To give an example, there is a 4-year-old Swanage child who stops breathing periodically. The parents have to perform life-saving CPR until a paramedic arrives. When this has happened, there has never been an ambulance available within 10 miles, but on each occasion that their child has stopped breathing, the paramedic car has arrived in minutes to take over her care. Could Dorset Council People and Health Scrutiny Committee please ask DCCG to honour the commitment made to fully maintain the existing ambulance resources based in and tethered to Swanage in order to protect this isolated community's many vulnerable residents. Thank you very much, Debbie, for that statement. As has been explained, it is a statement, and there will not be a response to that at the moment. That is the only question or statement that I've got from the members of the public. Could I now go over and turn to councillors who are not on this committee? I've got 2 councillors who have asked to speak, and that is Councillor Trite and Councillor Sutton. Can I go to Councillor Trite first and hope that he's on the line?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Good morning,
Right.
Councillor Trite.
I'm having some trouble in that the whoever is speaking, it's repeated back to me about half a sentence later. I don't know whether anyone else is getting that, but nevertheless, I have prepared in the same manner as the last speaker, as Councillor Debbie Monkhouse. I prepared a statement which I wasn't entirely sure what to expect today, but I have prepared a statement which I would like to impart to the committee with your permission.
Of course, carry on, please, Councillor Trite.
Right. Okay then. I would first invite members of this committee to actually come to Swanage to gauge for themselves the extent of public concern over the potential loss of the rapid response vehicle, which we commonly call the ambulance car. Something like 1 in 3 households are displaying a Save Our Ambulance Car poster in their windows or their garden, and that's a truly huge number which I've frankly never known approached by any issue in the town over the last 30 years. It isn't a case of Swanage being selfish or fussy. It's a recognition of the vital importance of a service which Swanage's location and circumstances make essential for the saving of lives, which has happened many times thanks to the rapid response of the ambulance car. Despite its relative remoteness, Swanage is by far the largest centre of population in the district, and that population can swell by 2 or 3 times in the summer. The town is isolated at the end of a 10-mile cul-de-sac from Wareham, meaning that by road or ferry, the time taken to get to the accident and emergency hospital is one of the longest in the county, which can only increase with the forthcoming transfer of vital services from Poole to Bournemouth. The town is subject to the most severe road congestion outside the conurbation, especially in the summer months, which can only get worse with any move back to take days in the UK. On top of this, Swanage has one of the highest proportions of elderly and retired people in the county, even by Dorset standards, who are the very people who most need swift treatment as supplied by the ambulance car. That need has been demonstrated over and over again. Crucially, an ambulance car can remain almost permanently tethered, as the jargon goes these days, remain almost permanently tethered to a particular locality in the way that a conventional ambulance never can. Now, the last-minute addition of this item to today's agenda has done nothing to help the credibility of either the DCCG or Dorset Council in the eyes of local residents or Swanage Town Council, since the timing has effectively excluded their views from being expressed in one of the normal ways to this committee. The paper accompanying the agenda item doesn't say that the ambulance car is based in Swanage and is intended to serve almost exclusively the town and nearby villages, nor does it say that the DCCG made a minuted commitment to fully maintain ambulance resources in Swanage in the face of the switch of functions from Poole to Bournemouth. The paper suggests there are currently 3 double-crewed ambulances in Swanage and Wareham, whereas in fact there's one based in Swanage, one based in Wareham, plus a second Wareham ambulance for 10 hours a day. It doesn't mention the all too frequent operation of such ambulances beyond their bases, dealing with emergencies across the county. This leads to lack of cover in Swanage in particular, consequently excessively long waiting times for an ambulance. Moreover, the paper gives the impression that the ambulance car is not really needed, which is the exact opposite of the reality, because it ignores the unique service that the car and the paramedic provide in terms of swift response and the prevention of category 2 and 3 emergencies becoming category 1 cases. Now, it's vital that this committee is exposed to all the information relating to this life and death issue, both quantitative and qualitative. And it's for this reason that this wholly inadequate hearing today should be followed by a properly timed one, preferably this matter the only one on the agenda. This is essential before the committee comes to any conclusions about what it thinks should be done. Finally, I would like to ask the DCCG when it intends to come back to Swanage Town Council, following what DCCG has described as a recent listening session with the Town Council Working Party, and who precisely will be involved in arranging the promised engagement exercise, of which this hasty meeting should not form a part. What is the People and Health Scrutiny Committee's role in any decisions about the future of the ambulance car? Can DCCG confirm that they will come back to this committee before any ultimate decision is made? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Trite. That was very useful. I think, sort of as chair, I'd just like to respond on a couple of things that you mentioned there. I've agreed to put this late onto the agenda simply because I've taken a pragmatic approach that this is very early on in the consultation, and I wanted to get as much information out there to the public and to members as possible. This is not today. Today is not the day for the debate on this. Any debate prior to decisions being made will be on the overview committee should they wish to take it. This is not the right committee. If I can go on, but thank you very much, because I thought some of your comments and your points were really, really interesting. Could I go on to Councillor Sutton, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, supple, not supple.
Oh, sorry, I do apologise. I am sorry. That got us off on a good foot, didn't it?
Well done. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for outlining the role of the committee early on, which gives perhaps a slight change to some of the comments I was going to make. But with your forgiveness, I'll plough on anyway. So I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak. So frankly, I was surprised to see such an important item included as an urgent item. Having been informed late on Wednesday afternoon with a deadline of 8:30 on Thursday for public submissions, I don't believe that this sends a message of open debate to the public. And I think this is confirmed by the fact that you only were able to get one submission from member public, and albeit that of a Swanage Town Councillor. The retention of the RRV to Swanage is the most important issue to the town most important in recent years. In fact, in the view of us all, a matter of life and death. Some say that there's a deal already been done, and by adding this item at such a late stage, you do little to undermine that thought. You will, I hope, be aware of the campaign. If you come to Swanage, you'll see the entire town with the banners supporting retention, and you've been sent the booklet giving the stories of those who benefited from the RRV, and who is to say what would have happened had it not been with us for those people. The papers suggest this to be an update before engagement, although I believe that we had anticipated a full consultation enabling individual response. I remain slightly perplexed as to what exactly engagement involves for our community. The papers before you mentioned 3 ambulances, and as Councillor Trite has rightly pointed out, but we have 3 ambulances in the car. One of those ambulances is, I believe, for 10 hours and is in fact a recent addition at Wareham. The listening event referred to in the papers with Swanage Town Council was a limited event of 5 parish councillors on the Health Committee of Swanage Town Council and the Town Clerk, not the full council and not any members of the public. And as councillors tried to say, given the seriousness of the issue, we would hope that, depending on decisions made, you would have greater input at a later stage. You mentioned that this committee can look at significant change. And I would add what Councillor Monkhouse has said, and indeed Councillor Trite, that there was a commitment to the old Dorset Council, that Dorset County Council, that the car would be retained and services would be maintained until such time as hospital reorganisation had taken place. I understand that this is a different council. However, this council took on all of the roles and commitments made to and given by Dorset County Council. Can you not look at that decision now? And eventually, of course, a decision will be made. And at that time, I would ask this committee to ensure that we have a wider public meeting. We have so much to add on ambulance times, reorganisation, and at a wider meeting, I believe that we'd be able to give our points of view far better. Lastly, I fully understand that this committee is not making a decision, but the subject is contentious and one listed in a Dorset Council agenda. The public might understandably wish to have input. By taking it as an urgent matter, our residents have been excluded. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Suttle, and I very much appreciate your input into this debate. As I've said, I'm more than happy to look at bringing this to this committee at a time that is appropriate. But at the moment, it's not appropriate for the Scrutiny Committee to be looking at something prior to any decisions that have been made. That would be the domain of the Overview Committee. Could I just, in response to that, just ask Sue a question, please? Sue, There was a question there about the engagement. I don't know whether you've got any details about the engagement and how you're intending to take that forward.
So we need to finalise the plan,
Okay.
which of course we will share with you. As you said, Chair, and I've already referred to, this is the really early stages. So it's unfortunate if it's been perceived that just some of the conversation that's been had. This is absolutely at the very early stages. So we need to finalise that engagement plan. Communicate to you what that includes in terms of the listening with the community and coming back to this committee yet again. And I just wanted to reiterate, there are no proposals in existence at this time. There are no options that have been worked up. Indeed, one of the options the final agreed option may be that the car remains. That is an option. So we're at the very early stages of that. We need to conclude the plan and share that with you.
Okay, thank you very much. That is very useful. Once you have the plan for the engagement, could you please share it with the council so that I can forward that on to all members, because there are so many members who are interested in this subject.
Cool.
That would be really useful.
Jill,
Okay. Sorry. Thank you, Councillor Rennie.
Yeah, can I let you know you've got Councillor Cherry Brooks, Councillor Laura Miller and Councillor Ray Bryan wanting to speak, who are not members of this committee.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Could I go first of all then to Councillor Brooks? Councillor Brooke.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks for the presentation. My name's Cherry Brooks. I'm the ward member for South East Purbeck and the lead member for Highways. The pictorial slide that you show infers that the decommissioning the tethered RRU frees up resources to attend 2 incidents simultaneously, but the stats show that the RRV will get to an incident in Purbeck before an ambulance. So I can see that I can see why the concern is there from the residents. So I've got a question and a statement really. So the question is, do the call centre, or can the call centre, assess whether to follow up with an ambulance at the time the call is taken, or is that the decision of the paramedic if the RRV gets there first? And because that might be a process that could help with the timing. But the thing that's bothering me, and the statement that's bothering me, is that this does appear to be it appears to be a decision already made, but then again, people that campaign always imply that it is. So I'm open-minded on it. But I'm just wary that a couple of years ago, we were promised a large influx of ambulances, extra ambulances. Off the top of my head, I think it was 18 into Purbeck. In reality, after we'd replaced the old vehicles and we put in a couple of non-transport vehicles, we only actually got 3 ambulances. So the message that was being given was not the same as the reality that we received. So can I please make a plea that we are completely transparent in the whole process, and even if the message isn't very palatable, that we're actually very open and honest about it. Thank you.
Would you like to respond to any of that, Sue?
Yes,
sorry, I'm ignoring you, Nick. I don't quite know whether I should be going to Nick or to Sue, and I do apologise, Nick. I'm not intentionally ignoring you.
Thank you. I was going to bring Nick in a moment. Thank you, Chair. So the first thing is to say is that your kind of detailed thoughts, comments, questions are absolutely for the next stage of this process. So we want to capture all of that. So thank you, Councillor Brooks, for your thoughts there. So we don't want to lose sight of any of that. Without kind of getting into some of the detail that's for later, Nick, I didn't know if you had a response on that technical side of things that might be helpful for today.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, we are absolutely in the detail, but what I will just make is a very quick overarching comment that calls are prioritised in our call centres. So there are some categories which will trigger responses for both RRVs and DCAs, but those decisions are also made on scene as well by the clinicians.
Thank you. Hope that's okay, Councillor Brooke.
Thank you, yes.
Okay, thank you. Could I go on to Councillor Miller, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Laura Miller, Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care and Health at Dorset Council. Thank you for this. Having grown up in Purbeck, I do understand the geographical issues that ward members and town council members have talked about. Indeed, having grown up in Lulworth, I don't know where we'd be without our community responders, you know, who are often our neighbours and just turn up very, very quickly. I find it reassuring that I've heard a clear statement from the CCG that there is no proposal to remove the car, no decisions have been taken. Am I right in stating that? You're looking at the provision across the area. Nobody is proposing anything at this stage and you're in full-on listening mode. Is that right?
Could I ask you for a
Chair,
response?
would you like me to respond?
Yes, yes, please. Could you respond to
yes.
that?
That's correct, Councillor Miller.
Okay, perfect. In which case, I understand the chair's point. I am also reassured. I know the strength of feeling. I was in Swanage at the weekend, and I've seen the posters. I understand the strength of feeling. My role and my mission, I suppose, is to make sure that services are equally available to all Dorset residents and that nobody is put at risk because of any decisions by our health partners. I don't suspect for a moment that any of our health partners want to put anybody at risk. And so I think this is a helpful, very early airing of what is going to be a difficult decision and probably a very noisy consultation. I think it's good that we've aired it. I look forward to further meetings where we can actually get into the detail. If the CCG and SWAST are in listening mode, that is music to my ears and a really welcome thing to hear at this early stage. I think as well, where you have a town, and let's face it, it's Purbeck, but it's Swanage and the surrounding villages, where you have a town that's that engaged and that passionate. Certainly as local politicians, we're always calling for people to get involved and we're quite frequently disappointed when they don't. So to have this level of public engagement before any suggestions or proposals have even been made, I think is incredibly helpful. I will be sort of overseeing the Dorset Council response. I'll be representing people in my cabinet role, the residents of Dorset, the residents of Swanage, Purbeck, as I would any other part of Dorset, to make sure that they get what they need and that it's equitable and fair and safe. And so I think going forward, this is obviously the start of what is probably going to be quite a long road, but I'm really glad to see how committed everybody is to the process, and we'll be fully engaged and involved. And thank you, Chair, for bringing it. Thank you to you guys for coming along, and I will be watching and involved with interest. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Miller. That was really useful. I don't think there's anything else needed to be responded to there. So could I go on, please, and ask Councillor Bryan to speak?
Yes, good morning, Chairman, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to come in at this late stage. My name is Councillor Ray Bryan. I'm the portfolio holder for Highways, Travel and the Environment. In my previous life at Dorset County Council, I was the chairman of the committee looking at this, so I feel I have a lot to offer going forward before any decisions are made. The pandemic has made the ambulance availability even worse. Staycation has made the highways even busier, and we still suffer with problems of reliability with the Sandbanks ferry. The delay on the ferry the other day when I was over in the Swanage area meant I waited an hour and a half to get on a ferry. Needless to say, if I was a resident of Swanage, I'd be despairing at the thought of losing this very, very, very important facility. So I would ask that if anything's going to happen, that I'm at least given the opportunity to speak on this. As I say, I've got many sleepless hours on this subject before, and I feel I've got a lot to offer before any final decision is made. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bryan. As I've said, I think this will probably end up with overview committee, and then we'll come back to this committee post decision having been made. So I think it's a case of watch this space at the moment. Could I now have Councillor Took, I think, who's just come in to speak?
You've got, sorry, before Councillor Took, you've got Councillor Robin Legg, Councillor Nick Ireland and Councillor David Took.
Yeah, I'm going to Councillor Took now because he's not on this committee, so I was restricting this to...
Yes.
That's all right. And please excuse my cat meowing in the background. Sorry, could I go to Councillor Took, please?
Thank you, Chair. I just have three sort of linked questions. I'm wondering what the analysis is on the difference in response time between the RRV and the DCA. How important, for example, is a defibrillator in saving lives in case of a heart attack, and how does time taken to actually get the defibrillator operating affect survival rates? Which would lead me to, the answer I'm expecting would lead me to understand that it's actually quite important, and getting an RRV with defibrillator on board to a heart attack would very rapidly would be quite important. But I'll leave that to the experts to answer, please.
Can I ask it possible to answer that now?
So I think these are exactly the kind of detailed things that we need to be understanding as part of the next phase. So again, Councillor Took, though, will capture your questions and we'll feed that in. We absolutely want to capture that. Nick, I don't know if you were going to come in then, but that's certainly something that's exactly what we want to capture.
Yeah, I think it's really fair questions, and dare I say it, I will bring in the complication around that question. So a heart attack is generally referred to a condition where a clot is in the heart and the patient is normally alive and well, and that would require treatment in a hospital in a cath lab. I think what you're referring to is somebody in cardiac arrest, which would require a defibrillator. But I think it's very important to play out that this is a very complicated subject, which is why we absolutely need to hear people's views and to understand exactly what people's worries and concerns are.
Okay, thank you very much, and I do apologise for putting you on the spot there, because I didn't think you'd have that sort of information to hand, but I thought I'd just ask. Councillor Took, is that?
Yes, I just get the feeling that an RRV would be much more quickly responsive than a DCA, but thank you for the answer so far, and I look forward to the next stage. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Took. I'd now like to throw it open to the committee. I've got two committee members who've asked to speak. Could I ask Councillor Legg to go first, please?
Thank you very much, Jill. Can I first start my remarks by saying you opened the meeting this morning by saying about the minor injuries unit at the Yetton Hospital in Sherborne, where I am now, reopening in just a few weeks' time. And in particular, that's a campaign which John Andrews, my colleague here, has been very much to the fore on. And John is actually having surgery in hospital today. So if he were able to be here, I'm sure he'd be saying quite a lot about it. Anyway, to move on, I think I'm particularly interested in understanding, and I understand you've received a commitment from colleagues in the Health Authority and the ambulance service about the process you're going to follow in terms of consulting with the public. And I feel we need to understand what that process is and to have a feedback on that before the issue reaches a decision and before it comes back to this committee. As I understand our role, it is one of where a decision has been made following a public consultation, we can then examine it. And if we don't like the decision, we can ask the Secretary of State to intervene and to substitute their decision for the one made by the health service locally. So I just feel we need to understand the process you're going to follow. I think Councillor Trite earlier talked about qualitative and quantitative information being laid out to the public. So it's one of understanding the information that will be supplied to the public, the process you're going to follow to garner public opinion in Purbeck, and that really needs to be communicated to the members of this committee in advance of the issue coming back to us. So it's just really a commitment on that front, I think I'm looking for.
Can you answer that, Sue?
Yes, of course. Yes, absolutely, of course. And I'm sorry if that wasn't clear earlier. We said we'd absolutely. That's part of our immediate next steps. The work that we've been doing over recent weeks that we discussed with Swanage Town Council a couple of weeks ago as well, to develop and finalise that plan. So we'll absolutely share that with colleagues in this committee.
I think, Jill, that unless we feel confident there's been a proper consultation with the public, that that would be something we take into account in deciding whether or not we feel the decision made is an appropriate one.
Okay, I'll take that on board. I've just made a note about that. Does any other member have any comments about the proposed consultation that we haven't got the details, obviously, of yet, but it's something that has already come up a couple of times. It's very quiet out there. I'll leave it to go on to the RTSs. So if anyone would like to come back on the proposed consultation, please do. Could I go to Councillor Ireland now, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm not going to go through everything that's already been said. I was a member of Dorset County Council's Health Scrutiny Committee, so I do have some history with this. I think it's a pity in the presentation. I know it was acknowledged, but there were two scenarios put up as cartoons. I think it would have been a bit more illuminating to put at least three up, because in my mind the two are designed to forward an agenda, I think, and whereas the third one might have given explanations of why potentially a DCA on its own isn't necessary. So obviously scenario one, I think we're all agreed that RRVs, especially since the RRV is based in Swanage, can get on scene much quicker than a DCA. The numbers from SWAST prove that. So if it's necessary to provide urgent treatment, the RRV can get there quicker and can provide that treatment first. And that may save lives. Of course, if it gets there and treatment isn't required by a DCA or transport isn't required, you can also cancel the DCA if one happens to have been ordered. And 50% of the time, transport isn't required. So if your DCA turns up rather than an RRV, they've travelled all the way to Swanage to provide treatment, and they don't have to transport somebody. So in my mind, what we've got now is probably the best solution, and maybe with a better response time for DCAs. But I think the thing I really want to get onto is the fact that Richard Drex, the MP for the area, wrote to Swanage Town Council back in May. And in that letter, he said that he had a briefing from Tim Goodson. So it's a shame Tim isn't on here to answer in person. And he said that Tim had briefed him to say there was a proposal that the RRV should be withdrawn and the money would be spent on upgrading a 10-hour ambulance service to 24 hours. So that mind is, if the CEO for Dorset CCG is saying that is a proposal. I know it's already been denied that there is so, but our MP thinks there is. I wonder if they could answer that.
Thank you. Would you like to come back on that, either Sue or Nick?
Yes, I'm happy to. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Ireland. I think that's really helpful comments around the scenarios. And I agree. I think we absolutely need to do that, to build out a number of scenarios which will help the conversation with the public. We need to do a bit more listening in order to do that, and some more work. We've had some detailed questions today which will help with that. So I agree that further scenarios could be helpful with the next phases. Sorry, there was a final question that I've just lost sight of. What was the last thing that you asked? Sorry.
The fact that our MP thinks there already is a proposal.
Yes, sorry. So there aren't any proposals. We've done some work. So as I mentioned earlier, in line with the job that we're here to do, we have started some work in the background. It's been delayed because of COVID, which you know, but it's at the very early stages. So we need to we need to develop that and build on that. But there are no proposals at this stage.
Could I ask then, as there seems to be confusion, because within Councillor Monkhouse's statement, she does say that Richard Drax has said that there will be a withdrawal of the service. Could you please go back to Richard Drax and have a conversation with him about this? Because if he's putting out misinformation, that is not useful to the public. I am very, very concerned about that, because you're telling us that you're in listening mode, and yet we're getting a different tack from our MP.
Yes, we've not seen that communication. We'll absolutely go back and clarify. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other members of the committee wishing to speak at the moment? Very, very quick.
Yeah, can I say something, please, Joe?
Yes, yeah, of course.
Can I thank Laura, because I think Laura's comments were really, really useful and in a way calming on this situation around it. And I think when there is misinformation, that actually can cause a huge issue, because we know how emotive this is, and how long it's been going on. I can remember people coming into Southwark's house to talk about this as well prior to this council. So that was really helpful from Councillor Miller. And all round, these comments have been very helpful. The fact that it's come here today and started this calm approach to it, I think is a very good way forward. And Councillor Suttle mentioned the fact that there was a meeting at the Town Council and only the members of a certain committee were able to go there to that meeting. It's not for us. It's not for us to comment on how a Town Council runs meetings or who they invite. But again, it's all about the more people being on this journey, the better, and a better understanding that we're all going to have about it. And even if it takes a wee bit longer and it has to work its way through these various processes, I think that is really, really important. That's all I want to say, Joe. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Rennie. I think that is the end of people wanting to speak. I think just as a summing up, it's really, really evident how emotive this question is going to be and how this issue is going to be. And I think it's going to be a really difficult one to take forward in a controlled, sensible sort of way, because it looks as if a lot of people are very entrenched in their views, and it's how you get the facts out to the public that is going to be really, really important. I understand that you haven't made any decisions. There are no proposals on the table, and I would just reiterate that at the moment, that there are no proposals on the table. Going forward, I would like to have some discussions with you as to how health scrutiny will be involved in this, because we will undoubtedly be involved again in the future, and we will undoubtedly still continue to have an awful lot of emails, correspondence, phone calls from members of the public, and that is absolutely right. And as Councillor Miller said, we love this when people are actually taking part in this sort of thing. As councillors, we so often sit here and we say to the public, what do you want? And there's just a silence out there. So I find this sort of debate really, really refreshing. So if I'm not going to make any commitment to anything, because we've got no idea on timescales or anything else at the moment, but I would welcome a discussion with you as to how we as a council are going to take this forward, bearing in mind that it is not the council who are going to be the decision makers in this. our role on it will be is the possibility of us responding to the consultation. Should we choose to, which would be through the overview committee, that would not be my decision at all. I chair scrutiny committee. I do not get involved with overview. That is not my role. But I would also be interested in timescales for bringing it back to this committee once you've got proposals to put onto the table. Okay, I think
that Councillor Izzard has made a comment about she's going to request that this is going to go to People in Health overview scrutiny.
Okay.
Sorry, overview committee.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Rennie. Okay, so with that, I'd like to thank both Sue and Nick for coming along today and for giving the presentation. And I'd like to close this part of the meeting. I'd like to have a 5-minute comfort break. We've got scheduled in now, and I will see everybody back in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Molly, for putting that forward.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Okay, I think, can I just check Fiona is there? Fiona?
Yes, Chairman, I'm here.
Okay, if I can just confirm you're there. So thank you very much. We thank you very much for that comfort break. I think it was much needed after that very interesting, very useful debate about the paramedic car in Swanage. If I can move on to the next item now, which is fostering and adoption. Now we've got two reports on this. We're going to take the fostering report first, and I believe we should have Councillor Parry in the room. So if I can go, I don't know whether you want to say anything ahead of this or whether you're quite happy for me to go straight to an officer to present this report, Andrew.
Thank you, Chairman, and if I may just say a few brief words, and with your indulgence, and thanks to the committee for looking at our reports today. Two very distinct reports, one looking at our annual fostering report and the other at our Aspire adoption service. And it's significant to bear in mind that our fostering report refers to a service that is provided in the Dorset Council area, and our Aspire service is a pan-Dorset arrangement with BCP Council, and therefore there are some different statistics and information to bear in that, and also financial contributions and responsibilities. It would be remiss of me not to thank everybody who's been involved in the care and protection of children and young people during the last year. The pandemic year has been incredibly challenging, and we owe a huge debt of gratitude to our foster carers who have coped magnificently with some very challenging circumstances. But in all our hearts are, of course, our children and young people, who we are responsible for, and they have had an incredible year. Some have thrived, some have got through it, and some have struggled. And we support them all in every way we can, and I hope the reports before us will reflect that. I'll be very happy to take any political questions, but I do appreciate the nature of these reports are operational, and therefore you will want to draw on the expertise of the directors who are present today. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Parry. Can I ask who's going to be presenting the fostering report first? I see we have Sarah Jane, but we also have Teresa present this morning.
Yeah, good morning, Chair, and good morning,
Good morning.
Yes, Teresa Levy, Executive Director for Children, and delighted really to have both the opportunity to talk about our fostering service, our adoption service, and our children with special educational needs later. As Andrew has very capably described, our children have had an interesting year, which we'll not really understand for some time, I don't think, in terms of the impact of that. Many of you may be familiar with Professor Munro's statement that a month in the life of a child where they haven't got good permanency planning equates to a year lost. I'm just wondering what the loss might be for some of our children following a pandemic. So we'll ponder that, but we've been pondering that with our fostering service and with our adoption service and with our schools and others. So I am joined today by our Corporate Director for Care and Safeguarding, Sarah Jane Smedmore, and John Heron, who is our manager responsible for our fostering service. So there'll be lots of opportunity for any detailed questions should colleagues want to. But I just wanted to introduce the fostering service in its fullness. It is a very particularly distinct service. It's a very regulated service. It has a series of requirements that it must meet, and one of those requirements, as must the adoption service, is to produce an annual report, and that's what you have in front of you, with a lot of detail and a lot of information around the journey that the fostering service has been on in the last year. It's true to say that Dorset County Council and therefore inherited by Dorset Council was a very had a very high level of numbers of children in our care. Children came into our care at a higher rate than other places like us, and they stayed in our care at a higher rate than other places like us. That inevitably placed a significant pressure upon the placement capacity locally and more broadly, and has meant that we have still more children in our care than other places like us. It is in a much more managed space a year on, but we still are looking frequently to have more children than we can easily have placements. That is pretty true across the country. The campaign for foster carers is a countrywide challenge. We're all busily trying to make sure that we can recruit the right carers for our children. And our children are fabulous, our carers are fabulous, but some of our children are very traumatized by their experiences, and particularly when they are older, but even the little ones can be very troubling to support in that, managing that trauma, and therefore can be troubling to care for in a family household. So we're frequently looking at wanting to recruit more and more carers for more challenging young people. But we understand that challenge is about trauma. Our children are fabulous, and we are looking, and I would never miss an opportunity on a public meeting to appeal for further carers. And we need carers for all manner of our children, but we certainly need carers who can manage our older young people and to do that really effectively. Our service has been looking at themselves and making sure that they're as modernised as possible, operating in as modern a way and operating within the standards. And we've been doing that with both the service and every part of that service, including the fostering panel, as we're required to. So we've been on that particular improvement programme now for many months, and we're seeing that really being able to deliver huge opportunities. Our foster carers, along with many others, are often ageing, and we do see some foster carers leave the service, and that's pretty much a kind of net balance in the last year or so. So we've got a lot of recruitment, but as we see people retiring or leaving the service for other purposes, as you might appreciate, during COVID, we lost a significant number of carers to shielding and carers who were not fit and well enough to take other people into their household. And following this period of time, we are expecting to see some of that loss continue to be a permanent loss, because I guess it's about people thinking about their well-being and their family's well-being, and so we're seeing some changes in that. So those are really the kind of the big messages that I'd like to give today. A service that's on an improvement journey, that's made huge changes, and really proud of the team and the foster carers. But John will be able to tell you much more about the Foster Care Association, which I know is where we see such strength in our offer. And I'll come back then to adoption if I might, Jill.
Thank you very much. That was really useful, and I will echo our thanks to our fosterers, foster carers, and our adopters. I think they do an absolutely amazing job. I really do, and I can't thank them enough. But also thank you for the young people who are involved in the service, because they are so precious and so wonderful. If I can go over, you were now going to transfer to John.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. My name's John Heron, and as previously stated, I manage the fostering service for Dorset, and my report covers the period from April 20 to March 21. And I'd just like to echo what people have just been saying. This has been a completely unprecedented year. I've worked in fostering for almost 40 years and never known a year like it, you know, with the pandemic. But the thing that has come out and stood out for me has been the fact that foster carers have continued to take children, even in the midst of a pandemic, and to look after children, and to hold children, to keep children, and to help children maintain contact with their own families. It has just been humbling. We've also had a staff team that have continued, by and large, to go out and do home visits, see foster carers in their own homes. And I know that this isn't something that is practiced everywhere across the fostering sector. I know that lots of fostering agencies have made virtual visits, but we have done, wherever possible, we have done home visits to make sure that our foster carers feel well supported, but most importantly, that we see children and that children are safeguarded. So I'd like to mention the staff as well today. Our foster carers subsequently often say that they feel well supported, and two standout issues really for our foster carers have been that when we started to roll out the vaccines, our foster carers were put right ahead of the queue in Dorset, and I thank you and thank people for doing that. And I know that our foster carers just were hugely supported by that. So there's that, and then there was we made 2 additional payments because actually having children at home and being homeschooled all of the time is not only a financial drain, but they also need to have equipment and activities, and so we made 2 additional payments, and I know that that has gone a long way as well in helping our foster carers to feel supported. We've also remarkably been able to continue to recruit, and you know, for in the middle of a pandemic, for people to continue to think about fostering, continue to think about opening their homes up to children and to the families and the, I'm going to say, entourage that it actually brings with it, you know, is really quite remarkable as well. So last year we recruited 20 mainstream foster carers, and we also had we recruited a further 16 connected persons, so 36 households came into fostering last year. Another highlight is the foster carers, the Dorset Foster Carers Association. This is an association of foster carers run by foster carers for foster carers to represent foster carers' views, but to work closely with the management team and with the wider service to look at how we, working together, can actually improve everything fostering. In March, the foster carers selected an interim committee to get the Foster Carers Association up and running, and Jan Hill is our interim chair. Her husband Martin Hill is the vice chair. Kaylee Vargas is our treasurer, and Mandy Jarvis is the secretary. So we've got the Foster Carers Association. We are just about next week to meet to sign an agreement with them around their constitution, and it's hoped that in about 6 months' time we'll have elections from amongst the foster carers so that they can elect more fully and more regionally their representatives onto the committee. The Foster Carers Association will work with us in all policies, procedures. They'll have ambassadors that work with us in terms of foster carer recruitment, and actually even as we speak, I think the first one of those meetings is happening this morning. So we're looking at what we can do to recruit, but using the knowledge, the skills and the experience of our foster carers. For example, why do foster carers foster for Dorset? What keeps them fostering for Dorset? How can that inform a recruitment campaign? And in what practical ways can our foster carers help us to recruit more foster carers? We know that foster carers make the best recruiters of foster carers. So that meeting's happening right now. They'll also be involved in our training of foster carers, and so they'll be useful to us in lots and lots of different ways. They'll also run a couple of social events, so it's not all hard work. It's also about foster carers, building that community of foster carers so that they genuinely know each other and they promote interests for the children. The other thing that we've done within the year is we have developed an improvement plan. We've looked at the aspects of the fostering service. We've looked at them against the fostering national minimum standards and the fostering agency regulations and the care planning regulations. So the fostering service, actually, like the adoption service, is more regulated than any other part of the of social care. We do have the additional minimum standards and regulations that we have to comply with, and so we've looked at every area and we've drawn up an action plan for continual improvement. One of the big things that we've done so far is drawn up a range of key performance indicators and developed a dashboard. We're still working on the dashboard. We're still improving that as we talk, but at least now we've got a dashboard that we can see and can use that to measure what we've done and also to drive the business, so future plan.
some of the business. Other areas include looking at our policies, procedures and processes, and putting new ones in place when as and where we need to. We're looking at strengthening our duty service, both in the daytime, so that we can respond to foster carers, respond to placement requests, but also to look at what we can do in the evenings and at weekends for foster carers, so that they're not just relying on our own EDT, emergency duty team, so that they'll get probably somebody who knows something about them during the evenings and weekends. We're looking to recruit our recruitment processes, as I've already said, but we do need to target that on teenage placements for disabled children, etc., and sibling groups. And later on in the year, we hope to have the Mockingbird programme up and running, and at least 2 constellations. I can say more about that in the future. So 2 constellations within Dorset. Happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Can I come to questions in a moment? Sarah Jane has asked if she can speak following you. So if I could go to Sarah Jane, please, that would be really useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There's nothing more I can say really beyond what Teresa and John have said. It's a privilege to work within the fostering service and to see the great strides that are being taken really to make sure that we've got the best support for our foster carers and also the best care for our children, loving care for our children. I just wanted to apologise, Chair, to yourself and to the committee for the fact that our terms of reference came through as requested, but it didn't have draft on it. So we weren't clear enough. I wasn't clear enough. It was a draft document. And just as John has been talking about, it's part of our yearly refresh of all of our documents that's taking place. So I just wanted to be able to say that to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Just going to committee now. I've got Councillor Legg asking to speak.
That was quicker than I expected, Jill. I just need to flip over the screen now so that I'm reading the right bit.
Okay.
There's a couple of questions I've got really. One's on page 16 where there's a table which shows inquiries at 248 and approvals at 20. And then there's a paragraph below which I think suggests that there are, or maybe it's a paragraph above. No, it's a paragraph above at 14.2. which says, as at the 31st of March, there are further 19 new mainstream fostering assessments in progression, and additionally 28 connected persons assessments in progression. Are those 19 and 28 part of the 248? Because it just struck me by looking at the table here that if you get 248 inquiries and only 20 approvals at the end of the year, that's quite a high attrition rate. But it's not quite so bad if you add in those 19 and 28. And I think, John, you mentioned that there were 36 which had now been approved. And the next question was really a little bit about finance, if I can bring that up, which is on page 26, where you see in paragraph 30, you've got a £5.2 million allowance, funding allowance, but you've got a £1.1 million underspend. And in view of the fact that there appear to be in Dorset rather more than the average for a similar local authority area, rather more need for placements, foster placements, I couldn't quite understand why we were so underspent.
Can I respond, Chair?
Yes, please do.
Thank you. And then if there's more detail, John will definitely come to that. Really helpful questions. Thank you, Councillor Legg. And remiss of us really not to have explained that £1 million underspend, first of all. In addition to using our own foster care, we use foster carers from independent fostering agencies, private fostering agencies, because we don't have enough of our own fostering provision. And that budget is frequently overspent. So rather than having sort of combined them both, we've often, well, we always offset the underspend in our own budget against the overspend in an independent fostering agency budget. We've continued to set the budget to the level that we would want to need. So we've continued to set the budget to the kind of level, if we had the level of carers that we want to have, that we would need. But it does mean that we do need to kind of constantly reference the spend on the independent fostering agencies too, and so it's not in there, and my apologies for that. In terms of the attrition rate, it is sadly true, and that is our attrition rate is no worse than anybody else's, but you do find a lot of people apply slightly misguided sometimes, not really aware of what it's going to be, and where we lose people, and John may be able to say more about this, but sometimes we lose people immediately because there are sort of 3 or 4 key questions we ask them really, which is, you know, do you have any criminal convictions that would preclude you from looking after children? And you'd be surprised, sometimes people say, yes, I do actually, and we lose people at that very early stage. Sometimes people think that they can share rooms with their own children, and they can't, both within best practice and within the standards. You know, children have to have their own rooms, and sometimes there may be other issues that they may well contact us and say, I've just suffered a personal loss, you know, this year, and I'm really interested in fostering, and we know that that's the kind of personal issue that will make fostering less successful. So there's a whole complex reason why we see that attrition. Now, the connected persons approvals are not counted in those applications. Connected persons is really if grandma or auntie, or maybe a school teacher makes a request for us around a child that they know, the connected piece, to be approved as their carer. So they don't come from the normal advertising route. They go through a very, very similar approval route, although obviously it's for a particular child. And they then become a registered foster carer in the same way as our other foster carers do, and they should be receiving the same level of support and potentially payment. So they don't absolutely come into those applications in terms of inquiries. But John, I don't know if you want to say anything more about what we've experienced in terms of why people fall away.
I thank you, Teresa. I think you've covered that quite well. What I would say is that generally 1 in 10 people who inquire about fostering go on to become a foster carer. Teresa was talking about reasons why people don't, and we do sometimes get calls from people who don't have a spare room but just want to inquire about fostering, you know. So yeah, the attrition is high. The 19 that are included in there is part of the 248 that inquired. We aim to have our from application through to approval, when people do formally apply to become a foster carer, we aim to complete that within 18 weeks. The national minimum standards actually says 8 months, but we think that we should be trying to you know, increase that and bring people through as quickly as we can. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Is that okay, Councillor Legg, or do you have any supplementaries? He's gone. Okay.
I am still here, but I'm no, thank you. No, that's fine. My mic was switched off.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Legg. Could I go on to Councillor Jones now? Although Councillor Jones is not on this committee, she's a children's champion, and I'm always happy to have questions from councillors coming to us. So could I go to Councillor Jones now, please?
Yeah, recently I saw an article that nationally a lot of very young people are becoming foster carers. 20-year-olds, 20-odd-year-olds are actually looking after teenagers. Are we going along that route? Have we got any very young foster carers? And if not, are we going to look at youngsters in their 20s fostering teenagers, maybe?
Actually, within the legislation, anybody who is an adult can apply to be a teenager. So potentially you could have an 18-year-old who is a teenager. Most agencies have a policy of not accepting people under the age of 21. We actually do have a 21-year-old foster carer in Dorset. We do have foster carers who are in their 20s, and I think average age, I'm just looking at it now actually, the average age of our foster carers is about 57. But yes, we have quite a number of foster carers who are below 40.
So can we actually target very young people more than the elderly ones?
We can, yes.
I must admit, I do find it quite worrying. An average age of 57. They'll soon all be able to be counsellors as well. Although that's the average age of 57 is probably a bit young for us.
Well, I think it's all in our visuals, to be honest, Chair. I think what we're looking at in our visual display around our recruitment campaigns is making sure that we are representative of all the different kinds of people who we want to be foster carers. There is no gender, sex, sexuality bias to any of that, and we want to make sure, along with age and race, all of those issues are reflected in our campaign, and they are increasingly so. But as John said earlier, the best recruiters of foster carers are other foster carers. So that's why it's so important that the Foster Care Association gets out there and talks to people, goes to the rugby clubs, goes to the football clubs, goes to the badminton clubs, and says to those, as you say, lovely, fit and healthy young people, come on, it's you that we need.
Can I say something else? One of the things that we know from research is that for teenagers, the people who probably make the most tenacious foster carers are people in their 50s. People that have had their own children, people that you know, are probably empty nesters. They've had their own children. Their own child is at uni or has left home because they've been through it. They've had experience of looking after children through their teenage years, so they know what to expect and they stick with it.
Thank you. If I can go on to the next question now, Councillor Penfold.
Thank you, Chairman. It's not a question as such. It's just a point of note that I'm a member champion for mental health. I'm unsure if it's relevant for this item, but I thought I ought to mention it. And secondly, I'd like to thank Teresa and all the staff for their huge amount of work on this. I'm sure we all really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And yes, I think we all echo that one. Councillor Ireland.
Sorry,
sorry, I've missed Councillor.
You missed somebody else.
I do apologise, Jean. Sorry, could I go to Jean first, please? Councillor Dunseith, please.
Oh, well, thank you, Chairman. I had a couple of questions, but they've actually been, as I've listened to the presentations, they've actually been sort of answered for me. The first one was, I wasn't too sure about the definition of a connected person. Foster carer, but I thought it was probably a grandparent or actually a person who did have maybe a familial connection to the child. But I think that has been answered now, grandparent, auntie. Also, my second question was about the 19 foster families that had been deregistered, and that has also been answered by Teresa during the pandemic, that a lot of it is due to age and also the carers' personal health. So they've been answered now. So over to you, Nick. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Dunseith. Councillor Ireland.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, you caught me on the hop with I was waiting for June to go first.
Just making sure everyone's on their toes.
I just made the notes when I read the papers before this meeting. So I had a couple of questions or comments as well, maybe. So I appreciate last year was difficult in many ways in terms of recruitment of foster carers, but having been a county councillor and now a Dorset councillor since 2017, it seems every year this comes up. So I think the fact that we've gone up by one is probably commendable given the circumstances, but yeah, I'd like to see. Sorry, my phone is ringing. Put on silent. There you go. Sorry. Yeah, I looking back and looking forward, I think we keep struggling. So I'd like to know what we're going to do to resolve that. But the other thing is, I was looking at jumping forward in the paper, there was apparently we've taken the service in-house in terms of recruitment from the external company. And then if you jump slightly back in the paper, in section 10, it mentions the paper regarding staffing levels, which I presume doesn't exist. We haven't seen it, or it's not in this paper. So my question is, do we have the capacity in terms of staff to actually take this on? Because it seems if we're having a paper regarding staffing levels, yet we've already taken it on, maybe we've jumped in the gun, or did you already go through that process beforehand? That's my only question, really.
Thank you, Councillor Ireland, and yeah, absolutely, very spot on questions. So the staffing that was in REC had been transferred into there and is transferring back either in individual people or posts or funding. So that's not putting additional activity that isn't funded back into the service. And I would want to say publicly, it's not that that was necessarily not a successful process. You know, I think we've, as you've said, it's been a fairly steady process all the way through. It's just that we think that with being able to make better use of the council's own marketing and communications piece, we can do that probably more efficiently. Not that we're looking for efficiencies from it. So the funding that was out there will come in and will be within the team. And we're continuing to look as we do. This is a team and a service, along with the adoption service, that we are statutorily required to review on a yearly basis. So we always are reviewing our regulated services as we're required to. So we are reviewing the staffing. We're asking ourselves the questions about have we got the right caseloads. You've heard already that actually our foster carers report that they are very well supported, but clearly if we increase our number of foster carers, we'll need to also look at increasing our staffing. So that's the kind of real message that we're putting in there in terms of that staffing review. I think the other part of your question, which was really helpful, is so what is this? This is a wicked issue for the country. It's a wicked issue for us. How are we going to continue to increase the level of recruitment? And it's not a simple one answer. So for us, actually, one of our big challenges is that, and forgive me, because this language doesn't really sit very well with our kind of sense of these being families, but the bed occupancy, the numbers of placements that each individually approved carer has is actually a real area for us to look at. So where we've got one person, one allocation within a family, we want that to be two. That's an obvious, quick way. And if you think about it for a moment from a commercial point of view, that's what you'd be looking to do. You'd really be looking to maximise the asset that you have. And we think there's some room for us to do that with support. So the support that John was talking about supports people to take more and more complex children. And so really stretching that capacity across our existing base is an area that we're looking at, in addition to continually recruiting. And sometimes that recruitment requires a more clearly defined support role is going to be the bigger bit that allows people to join in. And for some people, so our harbour project, and you'll know about our harbour project, which is our Edge of Care project, we are looking at very specific and very well trained staff and foster carers for that service to be able to manage our most challenging young people, and therefore paying them a salary to be able to do that. So in a very brief summary, and we can talk more about the harbour another time, but in a very brief summary, that means that when they haven't got a foster care placement, that can sometimes be a challenge for people because they haven't got any secured income, as you all understand. So what the harbour approach allows to do is that when you haven't got a fostering placement, you're working within the service, which is supporting young people on the edge of care. So you have got an ongoing salary, and sometimes that salary is paying you to be a foster carer, and sometimes it's paying you to be a support worker in the harbour. It's innovative, but it's well evidenced from the North Yorkshire piece, which is an area of excellence from the Department of Education's assessment. So sometimes it's about creating better roles, that's the harbour. Sometimes it's creating better support, that's what John's been outlining. And sometimes it's making sure that your present base is very well supported and is stretched. So I think we have got a very clear plan around that, but it's not going to be an easy road, because it's not an easy road anywhere, but we do know from the best evidence we've looked at, those are the areas for us to focus on.
Thank you. I believe Councillor Ireland has got a supplementary.
Yeah, I have. Thank you very much. So just, I guess it's just following on from that. You're saying you get feedback from foster carers, which is obviously great. But in the paper, I noted, I didn't mention it first, I think it's 15.2, that the fostering panel is supposed to provide feedback to the service about, I guess, how the fostering panel works, paper quality, that sort of thing, timescales. But I don't see anything actually in the report which details any feedback, positive or negative. So I'm not going to make any assumptions. So is it possible for us to get that feedback if it has been provided, and if it hasn't been provided, why not, I guess?
Yeah, thank you, Nick. So it is absolutely an expectation that the fostering panel chair provides detail of the quality assurance feedback that they gather from every family group that comes. So you would gather feedback from social workers, from the fostering carers themselves, and from family members and from staff. We haven't had as much feedback from that this year as I wanted to have, and so therefore the report that came forward without enough quality assurance information in it for me to be able to present to this panel, I have rejected and are looking in a different way to think about how we can look to that to the future. We're presently reviewing the entire foster panel, as we're required to, again with standards, and making sure that the quality assurance that comes through from that panel will be good and strong. We're recruiting to the panel chair post in the next 10 days or so, and working with the panel, to whom again we are incredibly grateful for their continuance of work during this time. They have moved quickly onto virtual. That does seem to have limited the amount of feedback that they've been able to gather from colleagues, but we will be making sure in the next year that that quality assurance is stronger. That being said, we have had significant numbers of people, including elected members, shadow panel this year, and we have got a really clear picture of how we need to work together to make sure that's as effective as possible. So yes, more to do there, absolutely. It's part of that improvement plan really to make sure that the feedback is really strong.
Thank you. I've got two more people wanting to ask questions, and then I'm going to sum up at the end. Could I go next to Councillor O'Leary, please?
Thank you, Chairman. It was on the point around age of foster carers. 57 was the average age. We do have some younger carers, as it was said. What sort of different needs do we find that the carers in different age brackets have, and what sort of different support levels do they need? And what we sort of doing, if we want to encourage younger carers, what support could we offer, or what is being offered to encourage that?
It's a great question, Louis. John, I wonder if you want to say something about that.
Yeah, that's fine. Yes, of course, there are differing needs for different different ages of foster carers. One of the things that we do is we do have a peer mentoring system, so that when foster carers first come through, we would match a new foster carer with an experienced foster carer, and we try and do that so that they've got some shared interest and shared age. You know, to make sure that those foster carers do feel supported and relevantly supported. We also have quite a varied fostering training program that we make available to our foster carers. So there's training. There are just links. There are links to the Foster Carers Association, foster carer groups that they can go. And as I said earlier on, what we're trying to do is create little communities of foster carers as well, so that they have, you know, groups of foster carers that are like-minded, that want to do the same sort of things, but also need to learn the same sort of issues. Yeah.
Chair, might I just add something to that? Because actually, Louis, Councillor O'Leary, sorry, you've really tweaked in me though that the challenge we face often as a service is that we're probably in that over 40 bracket too, and actually I think there's a bit of work we can do with our comms colleagues, talking to young people. We obviously all like to think that we still know what young people think, but it might just be really helpful for us to, in this particular area, to do a bit of focused digging in around what would make the difference to enable you to do that. So thank you for your question, really helpful.
Okay, I think you probably have a supplementary question as well, don't you, Councillor O'Leary?
I did, thank you. I don't come into the over 40 brackets mine just yet, but it was a question on recruitment. Most foster carers I've dealt with and come into contact with tend to be from a church background. Is there been any sort of particular drive in churches to encourage foster carers, because they tend to be the people that I see, obviously not casting aspersion, but they tend to be the people that I see take up on a quite heavy basis. So it's a particular recruitment drive within churches into sort of those sorts of groups.
Yeah, I think maybe Councillor Parry might be wanting to answer that and talk about how we're focusing on particular groups. That'd be great.
Thank you, Teresa. I was just sort of reflecting on some of the comments I'd heard from the committee today, and the journey that the foster service in Dorset has been on in the sort of 4 years or so I've been involved with it. And Councillor Highland, I know, will recall, because he's having the similar sort of seminars as I did back in 2017, when a lot of focus about recruiting foster carers at that time was wholly focused around an annual event. It was that fortnight fostering, and that was the be all and end all of recruiting foster carers at that time. And we made the point very clearly, and I think we moved into that space, that actually it's a repetitive message that needs to go out there time and time again at different points of the year, and it will cover a broad range of people within that spectrum. And when you meet our foster carers, you do realise that they come from all sorts of backgrounds, they've had all sorts of experiences. Yes, the age profiles may be a little bit higher. That probably in some senses reflects that stability of position people have got to in their financial and working life, and perhaps the space that they have available, such as the legal requirement for a specific bedroom to be allocated to a child or young person. So, you know, I say we don't rule anybody in or out from contacting us. Let's have the conversation, come to our door, have the conversation with us, and then we can establish whether you would be right to be engaged in the fostering for Dorset, because that does matter. So we talk about the 1 in 10 ratio, and as has been articulated, some of those can be ruled out very, very quickly for either legal reasons or suitability reasons. The journey and process of becoming an approved foster carer is a passage of time, and people will drop out because they begin to realise the enormity of what is expected for them if they are going to look after our cherished young people and children. And they will just say, it's not for me at this time, or it's not for me, full stop. And then we come to those that are approved. And just because you are an approved foster carer does not automatically mean we will place a child with you. That suitability, that compatibility of the child and the foster carer is paramount, because what we also need to focus on is the reduction on the breakdown of foster placements, because every placement breakdown will invariably cause an element of trauma that has to be overcome at some point in the child's life. And it really is essential that we get the right child with the right foster placement. We understand very quickly how long that placement will be for, and the permanency of the child has been one of those areas of great focus. And you will see in the report, and officers will tell you, we have done everything we can to reduce those timely decisions so that we know that the young people will be either moving forward into a long-term foster arrangement, there will be progress made to returning them to their families in a home setting, or they will go forward for an adoption service. And all those things have to be understood in the remit of what we're talking about here. So in respect of pinpointing one particular person or group or society, be it the church, be it young people or everything else, my view has always been we need to reach out into our community, and we need to get a really broad range of people who can become our foster carers. I would also say, as somebody who was raised by my parents were in their 50s throughout my childhood, and I have much older brothers, and I have to say there is, when I have conversations with my brothers, we both understand that there is a difference between the energy levels of a 20, 30 and 40-year-old and the wisdom levels of a 40, 50 and 60-year-old. We all understand that experience, and matching those requirements with our children is of course an essential part of what we do growing up. I did want to just pick up on the point, if I may, Chair, that Councillor Penfold referred to, which is mental health and well-being. It is an essential part of any child's life that is taken seriously. But we do understand that a lot of children who are in care or on the edge of care may have experiences that are traumatic, and will need to have those mental health and wellbeing issues and discussions with us, and we need to provide support for them. And my thanks to Councillor Penfold for championing this area. In respect of connected persons, it should be said that just because there is a connected person who expresses an interest in fostering a child, that does not automatically give them a preference over a suitability for a child to be placed with them. We still have to go through a process to understand whether it would be right for a child to be placed with that connected person or not. And sometimes that does require some very difficult conversations, as we will know. And I know Councillor Rennie and I have discussed this before on a couple of matters locally. So we do understand those situations. And I think that does need to be made quite clear, because it isn't necessarily the golden goose that we think it could be for a child's life. It has to be addressed cautiously but responsibly. But there are some very good examples of it, and it has got some very good outcomes for children and young people. So hopefully I've addressed some of the points that I think councillors were making in terms of the political spectrum. In terms of welcoming staff that we try two-peat across from our previous arrangements, we are very, very pleased that Jo Thompson in particular has joined our service, has a ball of energy when it comes to recruiting foster carers, and I'm sure her and other staff will want to ensure that we can do everything we can to get the message out there that if you want to become a foster carer, come and talk to Dorset Council, because we want to look after you and we want you to look after our children as much as we do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Parry. I really want to move this debate on, because we've now had the best part of, what, 3/4 of an hour on this, and we haven't got onto the adoption part yet. I've got 2 more people wishing to speak that I will allow, as long as they are very short, and then I'll sum up. So could I go to Councillor Rennie first, and then it will be Councillor Pipe, but I'm not going to allow any more.
I will be quick because a lot of it has now been answered as we've gone along. I wanted to just ask one question around the fact in the SEND paper, there's a comment around educational psychologists and that sort of support. We've talked a lot about support for foster carers and the wider family around them. I wondered if during the pandemic anything extra was put in for the young people who were fostered as the SEND children. And the second question is, could you keep an eye on the need for the bedroom? Because as we've all changed so much, what worries me listening to the comments today is all these changes that have come about with COVID. A lot of people's spare bedroom has become an office, and a lot of people will never ever be going back into the office full time. And I wondered if that could be something you could keep an eye on, and over time we could have a bit of feedback about that, because I think that could be a huge drawback. I think one of the good things that comes around having the meetings online, anybody who sticks with us and works their way all the way through to this will actually have a very good advert for if they wanted to be a foster parent, because all the questions are being asked as we go along. And I think Teresa set the ball rolling very well at the beginning, because she actually said something about be a foster carer. So, but so really there's only one question there, Jill.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So if I just thank you, Councillor Rennie. So the support for young people who were in our care was absolutely turned up during this various lockdowns, and our virtual school worked intensively with our social care staff to make sure that where children could be supported back into school, because that was the right place for them, that they did. There were complications in lots of fostering households, as you'd understand, so that even if those children could go back into school, there may have been other children in the placement that were vulnerable, and there was real concerns about the kind of transmission of infection. So it was complicated, but it was very personalised. And in that personalisation, we know that's the best way to work with our children with special educational needs, because then we get it right, really. We are seeing most of our children back to school. As you'd appreciate, some children, particularly with high levels of anxiety, are probably going to struggle a little bit still with that, and we're looking to continue to work with them. The educational psychology support line was available to foster carers just as it was available to all other parents, and so that was really welcomed by them. Really good point. Thank you, Councillor Rennie, about the Home Office taking up the spare room. We need to think about that, and it may be that the team want to come back in the future with some thoughts about what can we do to increase the housing capacity for our people in Dorset to be able to offer support both for foster care and potentially for older adults with learning disability care too. And that's a conversation I'm having with my colleagues in adults around how we support those shared lives carers as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Pipe, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, my apologies for arriving at such a late hour. unfortunately did have another meeting which I had to attend. A question, please, probably for Teresa and Andrew. Has there been any improvement on the attempts to cut down the red tape and the time taken to assess potential foster carers, and indeed reduce the time taken to take on new carers as a whole?
Thank you, Councillor Pipe. I think you may have missed John describing earlier that we've set ourselves a much more ambitious target than the standards require. So the standards require an 8-month assessment. Sometimes that's right, because sometimes, you know, people need a bit of time in the middle to think about it, and you go back and it's a purposeful lengthening of process. But we think that somewhere between 18 and 20 weeks is achievable. And the moment, again, COVID it's not an excuse, it's just the reality. Things that have delayed us are things like medical records, historical records around you know, where people have lived in multiple other areas. We've just found the things that have delayed us in this period of time has been more others than ourselves, and just because it's been harder to get all of those background papers. You'll know that it is a very, again, regulated and extensive assessment that people undergo, and there's a whole range of references that we're required to take up, and we've been a bit slow on getting some of those back, but our timetabling is pretty good. I don't know if you've got an average, John.
Excuse me. Yes, it's about 20 weeks. So I think that we do quite well in Dorset.
That would appear to be well within the parameters that you aim to work in. So I'll leave it there, Chairman. Thank you very much. And if I've missed anything, I'll catch it on the. It's not a podcast, is it? Whatever it is, I'll catch it anyway.
Yeah, whatever it is.
Thanks,
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Pipe. Right, I'm going to attempt to sort of sum up where we are with this at the moment, because we've had a very long and very wide-ranging debate about fostering service, and we've also very much, I hope the message has got out there to any public who are listening, that this is a brilliant service, and we'd like anybody interested to come forward, and also to express our support for the young people who are involved in this service. I've got a sort of a proposal that I want to put forward. There's been a huge amount of change within this service that is still ongoing. When I came into this meeting, I thought it would be really good if we had a short working group just looking at the changes that have gone on within this service as part of the blueprint for change, and to drill down into some of the details of that. We've got in section 7 and 8 the drivers for change and the business case, and I'm just sitting here with a hat on that says that Scrutiny Committee is about being a critical friend and about helping services to evaluate the work they are doing and going forward. So I'd just like to throw it to the committee. Would they like to have a working group on this to take it forward? And also for a comment from Teresa before I take this forward. Could I just ask Teresa to come in on this proposal?
Thank you, Chair. So really always very happy to spend time reviewing with members, you know, the process and the programmes that we've been delivering on. As I've said from the time when I arrived as DCS here, it's no secret that children's services have had an unhappy history for many years, and I am passionately protective of making sure that we all work together honestly, transparently, to make sure that we only deliver what Andrew Parry's absolute requirement to us is of good and outstanding services, and we're on that journey. So very happy to have those conversations with colleagues around how we do that. What I don't want to do is to slow down any of the processes that we're right in the middle of at the moment. So I think in terms of timing, you know, it's never helpful to watch a wall getting painted before the paint's on it. It's half painted at the moment. Let us finish that piece of work, and in terms of timing, in the next couple of months, maybe towards the autumn time, really helpful to have a look at. It would be when we would be naturally reviewing and saying, okay, where's next for us? It's also the point in which we'd be starting to think about the Mockingbird projects, which are the important developments that we'd be looking to make in the next stages. So for me, it's a yes, and it's timing to make it most useful.
Okay, thank you very much. That is very useful. I've already got Councillor Ireland coming in saying that he's interested to take part in this. Do I have any other councillors on the committee who are willing to take part in it? I would suggest that we probably invite Councillor Jones as a children's champion to be part of this, but I really would like other committee members, please. I'm more than happy to take part in it, so that's two. Councillor Rennie. Councillor Pipe, you've put in an RTS. Sorry, Councillor Pipe, I can't hear you. You're on mute.
I am sorry. Yeah, it's just a question on around on what the working group would be formed to actually achieve. Can you just run that past me again? I may have missed it.
What I think it would be really worthwhile looking at is the business case and the changes that were proposed, and to see how that has worked going forward. It's really part of the blueprint for change, and just the specific part that's affecting fostering. So I think we could do a really useful piece of work because of the amount of changes that have taken place within this service, that I think it could well be timely at a time proposed by Teresa that we look at this and just see what Scrutiny can do and how Scrutiny can add value to it.
Okay, I'm fully okay with that. I'd like to be considered.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Parry and Councillor Weller have got comments, Joe.
Okay, can I go Councillor Parry, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Just in respect of the working group and the proposal to establish one, yes, wholly supportive of that. As Teresa has outlined, we have a very stated ambition for our children's services, which is to ensure that we deliver good and outstanding services for our children and young people. In terms of the makeup and composition of the working group, that perhaps is a conversation, and the terms of reference, perhaps that's a conversation we can take to a separate meeting, because I am aware there are probably colleagues across the chamber who would like to be involved who perhaps can't be here today.
Yes, yeah, I totally agree with that. I've also got Councillor Weller coming in as the chair of the corporate parenting, would like to be involved in this group. So I think who I've got on the list at the moment, I've got Councillors Weller, Ireland, Jones, Rennie, Pipe, and myself. So we've got 5. I'm just checking, are there anybody else on this committee who would like to take part in this?
And Jane Somper may wish to be involved with this.
Absolutely, yeah. So, okay, if anybody else within this committee thinks later on reflection that they'd like to take part in this, please get in touch. In the meantime, could I ask Teresa, working with Bridget, if she would set up a meeting at some time to discuss the scoping of this piece of work and also the proposed timetable for it? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And if we take that away as a recommendation. If we can now move on, I'd like to move on to the adoption part of this, which is the partnering paper for this. I don't think we need Councillor Parry coming in at the moment, because I think you introduced both of them fairly well at the beginning. Could I ask who is going to be presenting this paper? Is it Michelle? Is Michelle on the line, or are you taking this on, Teresa?
Sarah Jane, do you have Michelle with you, or are you presenting?
Teresa, I understood Michelle was with us.
Michelle, are you here? Camera on if you are.
I love these virtual meetings. There could be nobody out there, but I hope there is somebody there.
It may be that she's not here. That's fine. We're all perfectly capable and very knowledgeable about this adoption service, the Aspire adoption service, as Andrew has said, jointly delivered by ourselves and BCP, with BCP being the host agency, so they employ the staff. And it's been a service that's been reviewed in the last year by an external expert, BAFCORUM, and we've been working closely with the fostering, with the adoption service, sorry, to make sure that, again, in these difficult times, that things have continued to work well. And again, I can only once again acknowledge acknowledge that the incredible work, and it has been very difficult, matching children for adoption during this time has been challenging. It's been difficult to have those introduction sessions, and as you'd appreciate, some foster carers who are looking after those little people finding it quite difficult to also move them on in this difficult arena. But we have continued to see both recruitment of adopters. We've continued to see matching for children. We've actually seen an increase. It's not necessarily reflected totally in this annual report, but it's in our lifetime data at the moment of what we would have called in the old days fostering to adopt, and we now call early permanence. So many more children placed immediately with people who will become their adoptive carers, all things being equal. What we're seeing for the Dorset Council area, so I'll only talk about Dorset Council in this and BCP to talk for themselves on that, is that we're seeing a very much more organised, coordinated approach to knowing how many of our children are awaiting adoption. We've worked with the adoption panel that are really successful, really effective and really strong at getting feedback actually. We've had some really good quality feedback from that panel around how well that system's working for them. And we've been working to make sure that actually we see the level of recruitment of adopters a little more balanced across the whole of the Pan Dorset area, because what we've seen is that in many ways the adopters that have coming forward have been more from the conurbation than from the rural areas of Dorset. And we absolutely believe that we need to do more of that in terms of the further west of the Dorset space. I'm seeing that Michelle is with us but cannot get the camera on, but can take questions. So Michelle, I've filled. I think I was your warm-up person, so I don't know if there's anything else. We'll maybe go to questions, Chair, and then Michelle can join in with the answers for that as well.
Okay, thank you very much and welcome to the meeting, Michelle. I hope you can hear us. If I can go to questions, I've got a couple of questions I'd like to ask. One was that we've gone through a really difficult period with COVID, and it's my understanding that there's been a lot of problems within the courts and the court systems, and I'm just wondering how that has affected our adoption service, because it must have put delays in all over the place. As somebody who has an interest in housing and how all that has been affected by the courts. That's one of my questions, and my other question is around 3.19, which is about staff capacity within this service. So they're my two questions I would like to ask, please.
I think maybe Sarah Jane for the court work, and because Michelle's been more newly come to us and we've been doing a huge amount of work with the courts. Sarah, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Teresa. So we have been quite fortunate. Our courts have been, their response really during the pandemic, we can see that nationally our courts have been one of the best to make sure that actually for our children, their plans progress in the most timely way. That doesn't mean that in the height of the first lockdown, when I think we were all still just trying to understand what we could and couldn't do, we did see some delays for our children being matched to their adoptive families. But as soon as it was clear as to how we could go forward, the courts worked very hard with Aspire and ourselves to make those matches, as we call them, as quickly as we can. And I have, the absolute privilege of signing off as an agency decision maker our decisions around adoption, and could see that great thought was put into how both for our foster carers and adopters who were part of that process together, we were doing that as safely as we could for COVID. Foster carers and adopters really came forward very creatively to think about how they would make that work. And we've been very successful. So we don't have those delays now. We had a bit of a point where we did, but we're way back on track with that.
Okay, that is brilliant. And the quick question about capacity within the service based on 3.19, please.
Chair, would you like me to continue? Because I'm not sure that Michelle, I think she's having technical difficulties.
Yeah.
So just as part of, we had a review as the paper highlights, which brought us into the end of last year, and the service was reviewed. What we're doing is taking an opportunity at the moment to really think about, we have main areas of the service that we need to deliver. That's recruiting our adopters, as been talked about, making sure that once we identify children where adoption could be their plan, we're making sure we assess those children, we assess the adopters, and then we match children with their adoptive families. We also do special guardianship order support within the Aspire adoption and service. So you've heard a bit about connected carers already this morning, foster carers who are connected carers. quite regularly go on to become special guardianship carers, which means that they have parental responsibility they share for that child with the child's parents. So they come out of fostering and go into that arrangement. Aspire will support our special guardianship carers as well. There's also post-adoption support, which is available for any family who have adopted a child. So we know that we want to keep those key functions, statutory functions, in our line of sight. And part of the work that Michelle is doing is working with ourselves in Dorset Council and BCP to make sure that the staffing is right to be able to support those functions. And if Michelle was able to talk, what she'd say to you is what we can see. We know that Aspire deliver very well outcomes for children. They deliver very well for us. But Michelle is looking for efficiencies within the service to make sure that the work is happening in the right place and reporting that back to the strategic board, which sits in September of this year. So those people who are involved in the strategic board are aware of that review that's being undertaken. So I hope that helps, but all of the work is covered. So we had our operational meeting yesterday, and I can confirm that all of the planning for children is taking place as we would anticipate.
Okay, thank you very much. It's interesting on the finances. I'm always slightly heartened when things are going slightly over budget. Yes. I don't like it when things are under budget because it just makes me question it. But I note that this service is over budget by 167k, which on a budget this size is perfectly acceptable. Are there any other questions within the members, please? I've got no other RTSs on the chat bar. So we are asked to note this committee, note the progress, and to identify areas focused on for managing the council's relationship with Aspire. So I think I'm quite happy with that as a proposal, and I don't think we need to vote on it, so we'll just go forward. And thank you very much, and thank you, Michelle. I'm sure I'll meet you sometime. Okay, so thank you, everybody, and I'd like to move on to the next agenda item 7, which is about how has COVID affected the children with special educational needs and disabilities and their families. If I can go to, I think, Andrew Parry initially for a very quick introduction and then pass to officers. I would point out we are running extremely late at the moment. I had hoped to get to this one at 11:30 and we're now at 12:15. So I don't want to curtail the debate on it, but I think we need to stay a little bit more focused. Thank you very much. Councillor Parry, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and I will be incredibly brief in my comments because I think they sum up how challenging it has been in the second paragraph, where it refers to the fact there have been over 300 pieces of guidance and policy change which have impacted on children's services, requiring our response. That has presented a huge challenge to our officers. They have coped magnificently. Our schools have responded superbly. I could not ask more from them, but I'm acutely aware that there have been challenges. There have been, in some areas, increased assessment times and everything else that goes in when we are dealing with pandemic situations. We are aware that there are government responses in respect of catch-ups and everything else, and I won't be drawn on those necessarily today because they're not the purpose of this paper. But I welcome the report before you. I think it's quite candid in what it's setting about the challenges that we've faced, and I'm sure officers will give you further explanation.
Thank you. If I can transfer to officers now.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to hand you straight over to Vic Verma, who's our new interim corporate director for education, standing in for Mark Blackman, who's taken up position at St Mary's in Shaftesbury. So Vic has been giving leadership to the FDND piece for some time and has responsibility for this paper. So if I hand you straight over to Vic, who'll do a brief introduction and then happily take any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Chair. I'll canter through some of the highlights of the report, and then, as Teresa said, take questions. So, I think, as Teresa said earlier, the impact of COVID on our children and young people won't be fully known, and in particular those with special educational needs, for some time. But we do start to see some of those emerging trends and the impact. And akin to that, we were part of the Ofsted research that was undertaken in October on the wider national research for the impact of children on SEND, and we're quite pleased to be able to support that piece of work and contribute to the national discussion on this area. We know that the pandemic will have affected our most vulnerable children most significantly, and I think in particular it may have also even pushed some of our children who were at risk of vulnerability to being vulnerable, and I think that's certainly something that we have tracked very carefully. And some of our children and young people through the pandemic, when schools had closed during the various lockdowns, may have actually engaged better with online learning at home, but we know that's absolutely not the case for all of our children, and each child has had a slightly different experience of the pandemic. As Andrew Parry said, 300 pieces of guidance and policy changes across government over that period, which, you know, and I thank our officers in terms of, you know, their ability to assimilate that information and get clear communications out to our schools to support them and our community and our partners. Quite often those changes, as you'll be aware, were very close to when they needed to be implemented, and that involved a lot of reactionary work from our wider team. And I think furthermore we should remain proud of our education community, who again remained open throughout the period, in particular for key working children and children with special educational needs. But we know that a large proportion of children with SEND were not able to access education during those lockdowns as well. Throughout the pandemic, we ran a school attendance tracker, which was to track our vulnerable children, which Ofsted identified as an area of leading practice and featured in their national paper, which was broadly based on the DfE definition of at-risk children and vulnerable children, but actually we extended that slightly to ensure that we captured all children, including those at risk, based on head teacher judgments as well, which was very helpful for us to be able to collate that data and organise our response in that way. Each of our schools had a link worker within our services to maintain those strong communications. That was extremely helpful during points when guidance was coming out very quickly, when risk assessments needed to be done for returning individual children back to school. And that was weekly. We had weekly communications with our head teachers throughout that period. There was some impact on education, health and care needs assessments, so new requests for assessment. Interestingly, we found that despite schools experiencing reduced service or closure owing to the pandemic, that the number of needs assessments continued at the same rate as we had seen the previous year. And whilst some may expect a bit of a drop in that, actually we tracked that over the last couple of years, and there was a fairly steady number of requests. The team in the last calendar year of 2020 achieved 79.9% timeliness within the 20-week period, against a national average of 58%. So whilst there was some drop in performance, colleagues in the SEND service were able to meet timescales for the majority of our families and more than national. But we appreciate that there will be 20% of families that weren't able to receive their plan within the statutory timescales. Our colleagues across health and also our own educational psychologists adapted to online working very, very rapidly, which will have affected the therapies that our young people will have received. And move on to probably the EP helpline, the educational psychology helpline, which wasn't just available to children with special educational needs, but all children. And we saw some quite interesting take up there in terms of the raised anxieties of managing home working and those behaviours. Interestingly, the relationship and the effect on siblings was identified as something both for siblings with special educational needs, but also siblings without. And obviously parents of children with ASC, so autism and attention hyperactivity disorder as well. So we continue to see that, and our educational psychology team were able to support families by sending tools, supporting them by phone and giving them the best advice they could. And that helpline continues now on a slightly reduced timetable, but continues to serve our communities. The paper goes on to talk about inclusion in mainstream, and that's we want our recovery in across Dorset to be an inclusive recovery, which is for all children, and we continue to work with our schools on supporting them around inclusive practices, and there are a number of supports that we'll be providing. And really just a couple of other areas. So summer in Dorset will have come up in terms of the short break support that we were able to provide our families in the summer of last year, which is now a national programme, and has been taken up as a national programme. And of course, supporting our young people around preparation for adulthood and transitions. So whilst we, against a backdrop of a challenging financial picture, both in Dorset and nationally around the high needs block, we continue to support our families. We continue to see positive performance, but we know we can do better in terms of our 20-week performance, and we continue to operate at about 80 to 85% of our families receiving their education, health and care plan within the 20-week period. And obviously there are other plans in terms of expanding specialist provision across Dorset, which I'm happy to come on to as well. So I'm happy to pause there, Chair, for questions.
Okay, committee, can I ask for questions, please? I've got no RTSs in the chat bar at the moment, which...
Could I ask a question, Chair? Councillor Pipe.
Yes, of course you can.
Thank you. In one of my other roles as chairman of the appeals committee, we're often given evidence by council officers and by the parent or guardian of the child, where they're actually waiting on an EHCP, and Dorset Council haven't provided one for our evidence. Can anybody comment on the situation with relevance to the appeals process, please? It's just quite frustrating at times when we don't know whether the child's going to get an EHCP or is not, because it does make a difference to the judgments that I have to make in reference to the particular child.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Pipe. So I would be really interested in following that conversation through with you to think about how we can make sure that you've got all of the information you need, EHCP or otherwise, at your appeals panel, because I would expect you to have that. So it would be good to understand some examples of that if you have them. Otherwise, let's just pick up a conversation between yourself and Vic and make sure that we got the right information to you, because it's there, it's available. You know, the localities now are so much more integrated and have a real grip on who their children are, that we should be able to provide you with really meaningful information as part of that process to be able to support you. Thank you for raising it.
Okay, as he suggests, we'll carry this on outside of the meeting. But if you'd be kind enough to put your name in the chat bar, then I'll be able to contact you. Because I don't have names on pictures at the moment. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions?
Just one point. On page 96, there will be acronyms we don't know: EP, SENSS, HVSS, and PMNS. And again, that's not a criticism. Teresa's doing
it frustrates us every time it drops through as well, Councillor Rennie. So yes,
I often say this on the TV forum as well, you know.
I must admit, thank goodness for Google at times.
If I may just apologise to Councillor Rennie, and don't you worry, Molly, I shall have a word with the DCS PDQ about removing that. Thank you.
Oh, brilliant.
I'm glad you're cracking jokes at the end of a long meeting.
Yeah, I've just got one quick question on this, and that is how you balance between the needs to keep a child in mainstream school and putting them into a specialised school, because the challenges must be incredibly difficult, where it may well be cheaper to put a child into a special school, but is that the right thing for the child? Is it possible to keep them in mainstream with additional resourcing? It's something that quite worries me.
If I may answer that one, the context is so important here. I mean, we often see cases of small local village primaries with 200 or 300 children or less, and the support that they're often asking us for is very different to those that are much larger middle schools, secondary schools across the county will be asking for. So in terms of support for mainstream, we do have what's called a graduated approach, which sets out the type of support that children and young people should ordinarily be expected to receive from their mainstream setting. And the Children and Families Act does set out that every family of a child with SEN has a right to mainstream if that's what they choose. So we do our best to work with our school community around inclusive practices and through our outreach work and our specialist teachers and our various teaching colleagues to support into the sector. And there's a number of areas we're looking at to strengthen that ready for the autumn term. But as I said, it very much depends on quite often the budget of the school and the size of the school, and we always have to be proportional in the way that we're working with them.
Okay, thank you very much.
Jill, could I ask something that sort of connects with this a bit? We've talked about EHCPs and the fact that you still had a lot of requests during COVID from schools, but as you mentioned the autumn, are you expecting, as things sort of settle more and we start a new term in September, to be receiving more? Because you did mention the fact that some children, COVID has tipped them over into that. And of course, I'm thinking about St Mary's as well, because if the delays become a bigger and bigger delay, the situation for trying to get these children who are needing this help, maybe more in the north of the county or into St Mary's, could be delayed. It's a bit of a convoluted question, but it just occurred to me during this presentation.
So if I just, I think this is our, there are DFE projections around the increased need for all children, and they are quite alarming, I have to say. If we were to peg along the demand both in referrals generally and in referrals around education, health and care plans, where the DFE themselves are projecting that's likely, that would be very, very challenging for us. What we've been able to see within Dorset Council Children's Services is that actually, because of our ways of working and the ways in which we've responded in each lockdown, our actual demand, whilst it has increased, hasn't increased at the same rate as others. And we are beginning to be able to more closely correlate that to the locality working, the link workers in schools and some of those matters. So we feel at the moment our systems are doing everything they can to manage down that new curve, you know, the new Mexican hat, if you like. The big challenge we face is that we just don't know what the impact's going to have been for some children who have been out of school during the whole of the period, how easily they're going to come back. We're working in every single area for children who are home educated, for children who have been missing out on education because they're shielded, for children who are waiting for education, health and care plans, for children who've got education, health and care plans, working in every single area to get that right. But we are working within that arrangement of not having had enough provision for many years. So it is noisy, it is problematic, and families I know have sometimes been waiting for far too long. And so I do want to speak to any families out there who have been in that position. We are working to have a strong September start. We want our children to have a really good summer holiday. We're running summer in Dorset again this summer. We want children to have access to those play opportunities, to have a restorative summer, and we want to get back to having the best offer for our children. But the system has been under pressure nationally and locally, and it continues to require us to pay exquisite attention in every single space, which is what we're doing.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That is really useful. Right, I've got no more RTSs in the chat bar, so I'd just like to thank everybody who's been part of this debate. Our officers have been really, really useful, and I'm heartened on an awful lot of areas that I've heard about today. The recommendation to the committee is that we note this and support the work that is being done by children and young people, that is being done for children and young people with special educational needs. And I think we would probably wholeheartedly as a committee support that recommendation.
Yeah.
So with that, we don't need to vote on it. I'd like to go forward and thank officers and members who've been here for this part of the meeting, because we are now moving on to performance management, and I believe we should have David Bonner to present on this. This is a new area of work for us in a way, as we are changing significantly the way we're doing performance management within this council. We used to get quarterly reports that don't tie in with the work of the committees, but also we're going on to a lot more agile system, and we have had a couple of briefings on this. So I'd like to pass over to David to present for this and just talk us through it a little bit, because there is a huge amount of information, and I think one thing this whole committee is going to have to do is to keep on top of the performance management system. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Chair. Hello and good afternoon, committee members. So as you've just heard, it's a bit of a break from tradition insofar as you don't have your traditional written report. Instead, I'm going to share my screen and open up a link and talk you through what we currently have in our new interactive performance tool. So just bear with me a moment whilst I share my screen. Hopefully this will work. Okay, so you should have that up now. So this is a public link, so anybody can click on this and have a look at the information that you're about to see from Dorset Council in terms of its performance. It will be updated on a monthly basis. So once a month, committee members will be able to go into the system and have a look at the very latest information in relation to Dorset Council performance. And then I will come along every other meeting to walk you through the current updates in the dashboard to inform the forward plan in terms of what you might like to have a deeper dive into and scrutinise further in terms of where things are off track, or indeed some good news items that you'd like to know a little bit more about. So without further ado, this is the main front page of the new interactive tool. It's hopefully a very intuitive system. It tells you up here at the top right hand corner the last time that the information was refreshed. So this was at the end of last month, which is the most current information that we have. If I click on the monthly update, this brings up the current information for the council in terms of where we are. We've got it's all tailored specifically to this committee. So we've got information here around transformation for children's and adults and housing. So there's a brief summary overview there of what's happening with our transformation programs. And then underneath that, if I just scroll down, whoops. If we scroll down here, this is where we have the performance information. Now, at the moment, this is pre-filtered to items which are showing us off track. So we have a RAG status for each of our performance items. That's a red, amber, green status. Anything that is indicated as red is off track. Something that's amber is thought to be heading off track. And anything that is green is within the target and where it needs to be. It's based on a balanced scorecard approach. So it takes a holistic view across the council based on operational metrics, financial metrics, customer metrics, and human resource metrics, so our people metrics. And this column here shows you what you're looking at. So this top one here, for example, is an operational metric. It relates to the adult care service. The indicator is the total number of service users, and we're currently suggesting that that is a red metric. We have more service users than we anticipated, but the direction of travel, the dot up here, is green. So the direction of travel is also done on a RAG basis. If it's green, then it's heading in the right direction. If it's amber, it's a cause for concern, and if it's red, then it's not where it needs to be. This column here gives you the actual information. So last month we had 4,153 service users in adult services. It's a number, so this column here gives you the unit. There is no target for our number of service users, but if we scroll down, other metrics will be specifically targeted. This one here, for example, has a target. And where we have a target, this is the thing that's driving the RAG status. So the target here is 30%. We're actually at 42%. So and it's heading in the wrong direction. So I'll just talk you through the basis of how the tool works at the moment. We then have some commentary to explain why something is off target or flagged as red. We then have an action to outline what we're doing about that and whether or not that action is on track, and indeed who the responsible officer is for delivering that particular item. In most instances where we have an action, we will also have a target date as well. So this one down here, for example, is due to be done on the 1st of June. And there is the ability in the tool for committee members to track those actions and have a look at their status. Okay. If we scroll right to the top, so as I said, at the moment, this is showing everything that's red. We can clear that and actually have a look at all performance metrics across the council that are pertinent to this committee. So you can see there's a great long list of metrics. Everything that is flagged as red will have commentary, but in a number of cases we have commentary for amber and green items as well. Some of the information isn't yet populated. This is a brand new tool, and some of it won't be populated on a monthly basis because they're either annual or quarterly measures, but it will tell you that if you look at the specific metric. I'll scroll back up again. And apologies, this is a slightly whistle-stop tour. We also have a direction of travel filter. So as I just mentioned, sometimes things are flagging as green, so within target, but going in the wrong direction. So we are able to select all the items that are currently worsening, which again is quite useful from a scrutiny perspective. So if I scroll down here, the top one's a good example. At the moment, that's within target. However, the direction of travel is negative, so it could be a cause for concern and something that the committee might like to look at over a period of months. Going back to the reporting frequency, we only have monthly things in here at the moment, but there are, actually, if I take that filter off, yeah, so you've got annual and monthly metrics and quarterly metrics for the committee to look at. As I mentioned previously, it's done on a balanced scorecard approach, so you can filter them down by financial metrics, HR metrics, operational metrics, and transformation metrics. And you could, if you chose, also have a look at specific directorates if you wish to scrutinise on a directorate basis. We have public health on there. We don't have a great deal of health metrics in here at the moment. We are working on that, and as we build out the tool, we will add further metrics in as time passes. We also have a number of charts. We appreciate the fact that in isolation, a metric might not be particularly helpful to look at. It could only have turned red for 1 month. So these charts here, and I will show you what they look like, enable you to track progress over time. Now, this is a new financial year, so we've actually only got one bit of information in here at the moment. It's not particularly helpful. So if we go back to the front page, we have access to the full previous reporting year on here. So if I click on that, this will bring up an identical tool, but for last year. Okay. And if we click on the monthly update for this one and have a look at the performance charts for the last financial year, these will be fully populated. Okay, so we can see, just wait for those to load. We can see some of the peaks and troughs in some of those items. And it's a fully interactive tool. So if we look at the number of safeguarding concerns received during the period, for example, we can see that at the beginning of the financial year, we were receiving 282. We can track that through. And then by the end of the year, that had reached 417. If I now right click on that and drill through the data, this will then bring up the relevant commentary and the information around that particular metric. So scrutiny members can really go in, drill into the data and have a look at exactly what was causing those issues at that particular time frame. And there's a back button at the top of each page to take you back to where you need to be. So I'm going to pause at that point, Chair, because that's the sort of principle of how the mechanisms work. Would you like me to show anything else in the tool at this point, or are you happy for members to sort of play with it? I know that we have had one session already on it, and I was wondering if members have anything that they have already identified that they would like to add to the forward plan for some deeper dives.
I think this is going to take an awful lot of getting used to. There's just so much information here. I have had a good look at it, and it's really difficult to work it out at the moment. It is going to take quite a bit of getting used to. I think the ones that that are sort of jumping out at me at the moment is the one that you've just mentioned, which was around safeguarding, adult safeguarding concerns. That the number remains relatively high, and the feedback, if we look at AD09B, the feedback is that less than 60% of people are feeling that they're being listened to when we've got an intervention, and I think that to me is quite concerning. I don't know what other members of the committee think, whether we would just like a really short, I hate long papers coming to this committee, whether it would be appropriate for a really short paper to either come to this committee or come back as an information item. I don't know. Committee, talk to me. Tell me what you would like to do on this one.
Well, if nobody else has got a RTS, I'll say, if we've now got this, we should be using it, and it's there and it's showing us, but there may be a really quick and easy answer, and I see Steve's there with his RTS. There may be a really quick and easy answer to that we don't need even a paper for.
Absolutely. Steve, you've come in with an RTS. Would you like to comment on what I've just said, or
I can, as that's one of my
aspect?
measures. I can give you a fairly short but detailed answer if you'd like me to do so now. I'm happy to do a paper, but if there's a very simple and quick answer for that particular alongside the other safeguarding concerns, which is during the COVID period, it's been really hard to get feedback from individuals where we would normally do it face-to-face safeguarding. A number of our pieces of work over the COVID period have been, as with this, Teams meetings or telephone calls. People are reluctant to give feedback during COVID periods or not face-to-face. So that is why we've seen a drop-off in the number of individuals that have seen not felt as safe, not necessarily those individuals that have felt safe full stop. I know that's not probably quite clear. The percentage of people who are feeling safe is quite high as a percentage. The number of people providing that feedback brings the measure down towards that percentage. But I'm happy, if you want a briefing, I'm happy to provide one to the next scrutiny if needs be.
How do you intend to go forward on that? Because face-to-face meetings are still quite difficult and quite challenging at the moment.
They are. There's a number of pieces of work in the detailed feedback. If you go through the drill down detail in that, we do provide a number of measures that my offices are doing with regards to addressing getting better feedback and more feedback from those individuals.
Okay.
Jill, when we look at re-enablement and everything, because we will be looking at that a little bit further on, when we look at people leaving hospital and everything that comes around that, and it might fit into that piece of work, because we've talked about how a lot of our work is based on recovery from COVID as well. It might be useful to do something later on when we've got more knowledge of what the roadmap, we keep being told is called, and how that pans out into the winter.
I think there are going to be a lot of changes. I mean, there's a lot of talk about another wave coming in at some time. Whether it does or not, we can only wait and see.
Yeah.
But it's around sort of preparedness for that and how we go forward. I've got Councillor Penfold coming in. Is this on the same subject?
Chairman, my question's been answered. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I think we can. I don't know how to take this forward. I think we'll probably leave it for this time and look at it as we go forward. I can't remember when performance management is next on our agenda, but I think what we need to do as councillors is to keep an eye on this and flag things up early and ahead of committee, because we are only meeting every couple of months as a committee. I think that, sorry, somebody was going to speak. David.
I was just going to say, Chair, that that this will, as I mentioned at the outset, will be available on a monthly basis. And by the time we come, so this is on the agenda for every other meeting. So if you would like to, if members would like to look in the intervening months between meetings at this and get some idea of trends, there is a RAG table button on here which gives you a very good overview of the status of things just as a snapshot, and when the status of things changes. For example, the number of affordable homes delivered was red all the way through until September and then became amber. This item here, number of staff reportable accidents, was green for most of the year, then became red. So there are a couple of tools in here that are easy just to look at visually to give you an idea of some of the things that you might like to look at straight away. That may help in terms of focusing in on some of the things that you'd like to look at.
That's a tip. That's a really good tip. Apart from the fact that we really need a scrutiny officer to do that for us.
It does very much highlight that, doesn't it, Molly?
Yeah.
But I think that's another conversation that we have.
Yeah. I said that tongue in cheek.
Okay, members, what I'm proposing to do is to leave this as it is at the moment. But what I would like David to do is to, once this is updated on a monthly basis, I believe,
that's right,
to make sure that we all have an email to say this is updated, and then to have possibly a short pre-meet with a presentation, a bigger presentation on this, just prior to the meeting that we've got this on the agenda. Because I think asking us to plough our way through all this information in time for a meeting is really, really difficult. Is that all right, committee? Is anybody objecting to that, or would they like to put forward any other proposals for this agenda item? I'm hearing silence out there. So I'm hoping that that is going to be the good way forward for this. And thank you very much, David. And thank you very much for all the immense work that you're doing on this. I think it's a fabulous tool. And once we can get our head around it, we will use it a lot more. I feel a little bit that you've been let down today because we haven't come back and said we want this and we want that. But I think it is going to be a case of us getting used to it.
Absolutely, not at all. It will become second nature at some point. So yeah, thank you very much.
Okay. Right, we're now on to item 8, which is, whoa, where are we? The draft joint health scrutiny protocol. I think I've got Steve here. Would you like to present this? I can do a rough bash at it, but I think if Steve is here, if you'd like to present, that would be really, really useful. Thank you.
More than happy to, Chair. No, that's fine. So this has been a piece of work between the two local authorities, particularly with regards to getting a more streamlined process in place for issues that affect both local authority areas but have a coterminous across both. So for examples being things like, particularly relevant this morning, health consultations, where there's changes to large geographical areas that might overlap between the two, where the CCG or NHS providers are making changes, and it gives a framework and an ability for the two councils to have a unified approach to dealing with it, particularly things like sort of those issues that are affecting those residents that are across BCP and Dorset. And to some extent this helps about the sort of efficiency in preventing kind of overlap in some of those conversations that might go on. One of the areas that I see this probably being most used for is where there's proposals around variations, particularly in local health services. Might be a good practice example for some of that, or where it's affecting more than one local authority. So where it might be BCP, but it might also affect Dorset residents, or the other way around, Dorset residents, and it might impede on BCP residents. What we might also wish to consider is if there's something where it might affect potentially Devon or Hampshire or Wiltshire or Somerset residents where it comes over. It's about setting the framework for how a joint committee would be putting together. So what has been put forward is a set of principles that would support the protocol. They've been shared in the agenda pack. Some of the practicalities, it would be around the membership, it would be about quorum, it would be about items being selected to be put forward for them. We've tried to cover all of those as we go through. But yeah, happy to take questions otherwise, or leave it for you, Chair, to lead the conversation from here onwards.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. I would just add that this paper has already been to BCP because for obvious reasons we both need to approve this protocol. They have requested that we review the protocol within 2 years, and I actually think that is an extremely good suggestion, and if they hadn't have put it forward, I think I would have done. And there was also, just for information, there was discussion about the use of the chairman's casting vote, because there's an assumption that the chair will be on, I think it's from the whichever chair would have a casting vote. The position, I've just got a note here that says the position in the Local Government Act is that in the event of an equality of votes, the chair is able to exercise a casting vote, but it's the same for whichever council is hosting. So I think that's a bit convoluting, but I've got Councillor Ireland wishing to speak and then Councillor Pipe. Councillor Ireland?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I appeared there. Yeah, there we go.
Yep.
Yeah, I see Councillor Pipes also asked to speak. I'm sure he's going to say the same sort of things I'm going to. So we had a joint health scrutiny committee back at Dorset County Council. In relation to the current proposals, I'm glad to see it doesn't include Hampshire and doesn't include Somerset. Hampshire had votes, but bizarrely. The one thing that does concern me still is the essentially the veto. So basically, if we as Dorset Council decide one thing and we get defeated on a vote at joint health scrutiny, we can't put something to the Secretary of State. That was an issue in the previous one. It came up because of the clinical services review, and because the CCG covers the whole of Dorset. It was the clinical services review, so essentially the joint health scrutiny committee was deemed the people who had, you know, the best people to scrutinise it. However, you know, Dorset Hospital is in Dorchester and predominantly serves people in the west of Dorset and the south of Dorset, and so we had an issue essentially with the Bournemouth and Poole councillors were taking one view and councillors in our patch were taking a different view, and we basically came to an impasse, and it became, and Bill will remember there was a meeting at County Hall, I think it was, which was very controversial. I'm just slightly worried about the veto. I don't know if there's a way around that. I suspect not. But that's one thing that does still concern me. I think the fact that Hampshire aren't involved probably removes most of the concern, because Hampshire people were voting on essentially what they wanted to happen in Bournemouth, Royal Bournemouth Hospital. But I just want to put it out there that I'm still slightly concerned, to be honest.
I must admit, I do share your concerns, and that was one of my questions that I had on that. I don't know, Steve, have you got a response to that?
I have, and Councillor Arnon, thank you for raising that. That was a very live and aware conversation when we set up, or when we put the wording together for this protocol. If I can draw your attention to point 10 of the protocol, there is a exceptions process with regards to particularly strong issues, but realistically the way that we envisage this protocol being put into place is this is around socialisation well in advance of. So what we would like to be seeing is actually you potentially be discussing an item well in advance of any decisions being taken. Therefore, this would be the summary and conclusion of those quite lengthy conversations. So a bit like with regards to the conversation at the beginning of this scrutiny meeting about the rapid response vehicle, you'd be wanting to have a very early sight of any consultation that was going on, and then for the finality of that to then be taken to the joint committee after potentially both committees might have talked about it previously. But what we were seeing is point 10 hopefully allaying some of those fears.
Is that okay, Councillor Ireland, or have you got any supplementaries?
No, I think it's the best we can probably make of it, to be honest.
Okay, Councillor Pipe.
Councillor, I've forgotten his name. I hope he'll forgive me. Nick Ireland. It's indeed a mind reader, Madam Chairman.
Yeah.
Pretty much on the same lines as Nick was talking about. Working with, as it was at the time, the boroughs of Bournemouth, Borough of Poole, and Christchurch councils, which at that time Christchurch was part of Dorset County Council. It's hard work. It is very, very hard work. And as the chairman of the last joint health scrutiny committee between the three local authorities, there's pitfalls all over the place. You know, as Nick has already said, Hampshire had votes. Why? Because, well, people from Ringwood send their people to Bournemouth Hospital. Okay, you know, we had representations from people from South Somerset, South Wiltshire, East Devon, and there was also a facility for people that was never used to allow people from the Channel Islands to also have a say. You know, it was a bloody nightmare, to put it bluntly. What I don't want to see is this committee being hijacked by BCP, and whatever BCP says goes. That's not the way it's going to. I hope that's not the way it's going to be, and I hope there are safeguards in place to either rotate the chairmanship of this joint committee, or a solution is found whereby democratically one or the other local authorities takes the chair, but not necessarily the lead, because all items that come to this committee will be separate, but will affect both jurisdictions. I'm not happy if this becomes a BCP mouthpiece. Thank you.
Thank you, and I do hear your concerns very much on that. Councillor Rennie.
No, I don't need to say it, because actually part of what I was going to say was answered as well regarding this. So no, I don't need to say it. Thank you very much, Bill and Nick.
Okay.
The names.
Thank you. There is one more question that I've got, is that I've already suggested that if we approve this, we also ask for a 2-year review. I'm just wondering how the health bill that's coming in next year is going to affect this, whether we've had any thoughts yet, because from where I'm sitting, it takes an awful lot of the teeth out of health scrutiny, and we then have to work out how to put health scrutiny back into the system. I don't know whether you've got any thoughts on that or whether it's too early yet, Steve.
No, thank you, Councillor. No, although we are very well cited on the legislation that's coming through, and there's a number of changes that are coming through that might affect this, we have not yet said, but I'm sure both councillors would be happy to put a early review date if that is something, or possibly change the wording to say unless there's been a change of legislation as a exceptional review point that we have in as well as.
Okay, I think that the change to the legislation, I think it's just going to put a whole new set of whatever we need to do out there from my reading of it, unless I've read it very incorrectly. I think we'd have to review this then anyway. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on this? I've got no more RTSs in the chat bar. This is quite an unusual paper because there's quite a shock for health scrutiny or health and people scrutiny. We've got a vote. We never vote, but we're allowed to vote. But we can't vote because we're virtual. So having done years of scrutiny and never been allowed to vote on anything, I'm feeling a bit cheated at the moment. How would you like us to do this, Fiona, though? Because I think it's important that we all either express a minded to for or against it. Do I need to do a roll call, or how would... I've got Jonathan. Jonathan, can you advise us, please, on this one?
Yeah, Chairman, I think I can help you with this. I think it's perfectly legitimate for the committee to go to a vote, but the status of that vote is only a minded to, and then you will need an officer decision under delegated powers as to whether to accept the committee's view, whatever the committee's view is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But how do you suggest we do the vote? Do I do a roll call, or are we happy with a hands up, or how would you like me to do it?
Roll call.
So
Okay,
I think you've got an indication from Councillor Pipe that he'd appreciate a roll call. So if there was no indication of any disagreement at all, that you could do it by approbation. But I think in the circumstances a roll call, which I think we'll need Fiona's help with.
Okay, Fiona.
Okay, yes, Chairman. If you go through the roll call, I'll note whether they're for or against.
Okay, Councillor Adkins.
For.
Councillor Dunseith.
She's left.
She's left. Councillor Gorringe.
I'm against.
Councillor Ireland.
For.
Councillor Legg, I think, has had to leave. Councillor O'Leary.
Against.
Councillor Penfold.
For.
Councillor Pipe.
Thank you, Chairman. I've not heard the recommendation, and I can't move down the screen to actually look at it. Would it be in order for you just to read out the recommendation for me, please?
The recommendation is that, whoa, I've lost it off the screen now. If you can go, could you go back up to the top, please? The recommendation is that we approve the joint health scrutiny protocol between Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council and Dorset Council for 2021 as set out in agenda item 8 of this report.
Okay, I'm abstaining.
Abstaining. Councillor Rennie.
For.
And myself, Councillor Taylor, is for.
Chairman, we've got 5 for the recommendation, 2 against and 1 abstention.
Okay, thank you very much. So that is carried.
And it's
only a minded to. So if I can now ask officers to implement that for us. Okay.
Sorry, Chairman, you do need, and I think it's Steve is the appropriate officer. You need Steve under the arrangements that were agreed by full council to make the decision in public, so that we don't have an officer making a decision behind the scenes, as it were.
Okay, so if I can hand over to you,
unless
Steve.
Vivian's in the room, I think it is Steve.
It is
Thank
myself, yeah. So I'm happy to approve this from your minded motion.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. Right, we're now on to committee and cabinet forward plans. If we can do our forward plan first, I'd just like to update that we've got 2 working groups that are still running. I have had an email back on them. That is the Rough Sleepers working group and also the Registered Providers working group. I've had an email back on them yesterday afternoon. We should soon be getting up and running on those. But basically watch your emails and work will be ongoing. members of the committee who are on the quality audit working group will have had an email last week. We have an audit come in, a quality audit from the Dorset Healthcare, which we're being asked to comment on. These have a fairly fast turnaround, hence the need for the working group on it. We've got a meeting on this on the 15th of June. If anybody would like to join on this, they're absolutely fascinating, but they are very backward looking, and we are there just to comment on their reports. So it's not something that we go forward and say we want to do more work on generally, but there's certainly, for anyone who wants to get some background into how our health services are working, they are really, really useful. We've got a light agenda at the moment for August, but
it's a bit of light to begin with.
That's just what I was going to say. We had nothing on this agenda when we started, and I do apologise because we're very overrun now. So I think August will fill out as time goes on. The other thing I would like all members to do is to consider areas that they would like us to look at and to come forward with suggestions for scrutinies. At the moment, we're not getting many scrutiny requests coming in from either members of the committee or members of the wider council, and that is something that I'm really keen that we should start to be getting coming in, requests for those. If you need any help with those, any help with how to put a request together, please get in touch with either myself or Molly, and we'll quite happily help you with that. I don't think we've got, the only other thing that I am quite interested in doing is I'm talking to officers at the moment about the potential for some work on inequalities, because that seems to have almost stuck in Dorset over the years, and I'm quite interested in what affects inequalities, health inequalities in people. So that may well be coming forward. I've asked for St Mary's to go on in, I think that'll be about January, and we'll be looking purely from the children's and health aspects of that. The other one that I would really like to get scheduled at some time is about a scrutiny of Dorset's whole life offer, which is basically a look at from cradle to grave, how we're working, how we're transferring from one service into another. I don't know whether anybody has got anything else to add to the forward plan or whether you're quite happy on that. If anyone wants to take part in working groups, then please just get in touch. Everybody is quiet. And then we've got the Cabinet forward plan, largely for noting, but if anybody wants to raise any questions on the Cabinet forward plan, now's your time. Very, very quiet out there again. It's been a very long morning. So I think we'll leave the forward plans as they are. Any queries, please get back to me. We're now on to exempt business. There is no exempt business. So it calls to me to close the meeting. And if I can say thank you very much, it's been a very long meeting. And once again, I do apologise. I'm about 3/4 of an hour over what I'd intended to get it to. And one thing I seem to be very good at is overrunning on meetings, and I do apologise. But thank you, everybody. Thank you for all the councillors who are here, and thank you for officers. I very much appreciate all the work that has gone into this. Thank you and goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And Jill, don't knock yourself out.